The Silmarillion is a bit notorious for being difficult to get into, whether it is the seemingly endless flow of names starting with F, or the weird, unfamiliar geography, or the more distant historical writing style as compared to The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings. Even fans of Tolkien's books, like Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, do have trouble getting into the Silmarillion. The story can be hard to digest, or so intimidating that many do not get into it in the first place. And so I'm here to explain the Silmarillion. Poorly, but with much passion, because it is not a historical narrative. Well, it is historical. It is very historical, but it is also just full of drama and full of people, mostly elves, making very bad decisions, and it is very entertaining. And I don't want people to miss out on that entertainment or that knowledge, so I'm going to share it in a very chaotic fashion. And I don't know what I'm doing. So we'll all be here for the ride. Happy Pride Month. So just to start off, I do want to explain the Silmarillion a little bit. So you may have heard the name the Silmarillion and just have these connotations with it. That's a very long, complicated Tolkien text that not everyone is really able to read, but you might not really know what it's like actually about or what it even is. So we'll just break it down in the context of what you may already know if you've seen, read/watched The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. In the world of Middle-earth, the history is split into various ages. So Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit takes place during what is called the Third Age. This is when they're fighting Sauron and stuff. The Second Age is, if you're watching Amazon's Rings of Power TV show right now, that's when this takes place. And then the Silmarillion covers, well, first of all, the beginning of the world. Don't let me spell beginning. I'm not going to write it right. And the First Age. This is when the Silmarillion covers. Technically, the Silmarillion does cover all of this, but the main chunk of what people call the Silmarillion is the beginning and the First Age. Tolkien wrote a lot of the stories that take place during the First Age before he wrote The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and he did want to eventually publish something called the Silmarillion or something like that, but he never got around to it. So when Tolkien passed away, Christopher Tolkien, his son's first goal was to publish what he thinks would have been the closest possible Silmarillion that his father would have wanted published. And I won't get too much into the meta-narrative of the Silmarillion, because even though it's super interesting, I will just be talking forever, which I'm already going to do anyway. So, we'll focus on the plot. Okay, so let's actually start with the narrative of the Silmarillion. And as I said, we are going to start in the beginning. Not going to spell that. So, in the beginning, there was God. And God is called Iluvatar. Boop. So Iluvatar wants to create the world. And in doing so, he creates these beings called the Valar. They are basically lesser gods. Iluvatar is big capital G god, and the Valar are just gods. I'm not going to list them. And Iluvatar enlists his Valar to help create the world for him by singing this melody that will basically lay out the narrative and the fabric of the world, because Tolkien likes singing, of course. And this is going well. Everyone's singing, except one of Iluvatar's Valar, his strongest Valar actually, Morgoth, really likes gothic music, I guess. No, Morgoth sings discord into the music. By which I mean, Iluvatar has this narrative of this perfect world where everyone's happy. Morgoth is I don't want that. I want to rule people. I don't want them to have free will. I want to be the king of the world. And so he sows dissent and darkness and pain into the narrative of the world, into the fabric of the world, basically adding sin into the world. And Iluvatar is like, don't do that. So he kicks Morgoth out of wherever they are, down into the physical world, which is called Arda. It is the world. You might notice that this story is a bit familiar. So Iluvatar sends the rest of his Valar to then take over creating the world of Arda, making it as nice as possible while Morgoth tries to interfere. So the Valar that are still loyal to Iluvatar, which is most of them, are sent to try and make Arda as close to Iluvatar's original intention as possible while Morgoth does a bunch of evil stuff, whatever. We'll get to that in a moment. First, I want to tell a story about our first two Valar, and that is Aule, a Valar of like blacksmiths and fire and stuff, and Yavanna, a Valar of like trees and animals and stuff. Aule is very excited for the children of Iluvatar. And the children of Iluvatar are the elves and the men. Basically, that's the elves and the men are sewn into Iluvatar's narrative, and basically this whole preparation of Arda is for the purpose of making it welcoming for the elves and the men when they eventually awaken into the world. And Aule is super excited for that, a little too excited. He gets a little impatient and actually tries to make his own living beings, which he fashions out of stone, and he makes the dwarves. Except Iluvatar is the only one who can give beings free will. So these dwarves are basically kind of just like Sims. Like, they only react to what Aule does. They don't have free will. And so Iluvatar shows up, and he's like, Aule, why did you create this being without free will? Are you trying to rule over life like Morgoth is doing? And Aule's like, no, I would never. I'm so sorry, Iluvatar. And he goes to destroy the dwarves, and then they cower back without him telling them to, because Iluvatar is like, actually, no, I like them. They're cute. So I gave them free will, and, you know, I'll adopt them as like my adoptive children. They can't awaken before the elves or anything, but you can still keep your dwarves. They have free will now. But don't be so hasty next time. And Aule's like, yay! But Aule's wife, Yavanna, the tree lady, comes over, and she's like, hey, what the heck? These dwarves are going to be cutting down my trees because they're going to be building their forges or whatever. And Aule's like, okay, yeah, but also the elves and the men, Iluvatar's other children, are also going to be cutting down your trees for firewood and stuff. And Yavanna's like, oh, yikes. Okay, so she goes over to kind of essentially the king of the Valar, Manwë. I don't know what he does. And she's like, Manwë, is this true that the elves and the men are going to cut down my trees and like kill my animals for food? And Manwë's like, yeah, it's true. But, you know, I mean, I understand that you're upset. And so we'll let you give some power to one of your beings. And Yavanna's like, okay. And she picks her trees. She gives some of her trees the ability to speak so they can advocate for themselves and the other trees. And these become the Ents that we know of. And so that's just kind of like a mini tangent about the creation of some of our favorite little creatures in Middle-earth. But to get back to the overall narrative, Morgoth is messing everything up. So, by the way, Arda is flat. The Earth is flat. So this is like basically a pretty accurate rendition of it because it's flat. It won't be flat forever. We're not going to get to when it becomes unflat, but it's flat right now. So Morgoth is messing everything up. Whatever they build in Middle-earth, they build pretty mountains, they make pretty lights. Morgoth destroys all of it, and they're just like, okay, whatever. Morgoth is like more powerful than all of them combined, so they kind of just give up. And they go over and they make their own little land called Valinor. And this is a nice little land, and it has the 2 trees. These are the 2 trees of Valinor, and they make light. Yay! So they light up Valinor, and they're basically like the sun and moon, except they're trees. Oops. So, you know, whatever. All the Valar are hanging out here, enjoying life, while Morgoth is free to just, like, do whatever he's doing in Middle-earth, which is, like, fine, I guess, except Middle-earth is where the elves and their men are gonna be. So, Valinor is lit up by its 2 trees, but the rest of Middle-earth is basically in complete darkness, except for the stars from the Valar Varda. She created the stars to light up Middle-earth, but she's also hanging out here. So it's only the stars lighting up Middle-earth right now. And so when the elves awaken in Middle-earth, it is totally dark except for the light of the stars, which is why the elves are then known for liking the stars so much. They're called the Eldar, which means the star people. If you've read The Fellowship of the Ring, when Frodo runs into like Gildor or whoever, and they're singing about Elbreth, that's another name for Varda, because they just love Varda so much because she's the only one who remembered that the elves existed, basically. So the elves awaken, and it's like totally dark, and it's also basically Morgoth's realm at this point. So Morgoth is like low-key kidnapping some of them and torturing the elves and turning them into orcs. So that's one version of the origin story for orcs. There are multiple origin stories for orcs that are not them coming from elves and that I personally prefer, but this version is the version that's in like all the published texts and all the relevant adaptations. So we're kind of stuck with it. The Valar finally figure out that Morgoth is just kind of messing with the elves in Middle-earth, and they're like, shoot, we kind of forgot about them. They send their hunter Valar, I guess, the Valar of hunting or whatever, over there. His name's Orome, and he goes to find the elves. And Morgoth has also been like sowing suspicion about the Valar and like fear that the being that's been kidnapping them is like this huntsman. So when Orome shows up, they're like, ah, scary. And a lot of them run away, but not all of them. So Orome goes back and tells the Valar about the elves, and they're like, okay, we need to like lock in. We need to get rid of Morgoth. And so they lock in, and they defeat Morgoth. They chain him up in some chains or whatever, and lock him up somewhere. I don't know. I'll put him here for now. And they save Middle-earth, I guess. But they also are very Valinor-pilled. I mean, they really want the elves to come to Valinor. So Orome goes back to the elves, and they're still kind of sus of him, and especially his offer to just like bring them somewhere else that they've never been. But there are 3 kings of the elves, because they've already invented monarchy, I guess, who stepped forward to be ambassadors. And that is Ingwe, who doesn't get a photo, Finwe, and Thingol. He had a different name originally. I'm skipping over a lot of the name changes because I'm just trying to make this like very straightforward, and I feel like that would be extra confusing. So just like don't worry about it if you've read it and you're like, what is going on? Okay. So Ingwe, Finwe, and Thingol are the Elf King ambassadors who go with Orome to Valinor and are like, oh yeah, this is actually pretty cool. Okay, so they come back to Middle-earth. And they're like, guys, let's go to Valinor. It's actually pretty good, and Middle-earth is like scary. And so I'm not gonna get into this too much, but this is where like the elf splits up into the different kind of elves. So like there's a lot of elves that just decide not to go to Valinor. They'll call the Avari. I think it means the unwilling or something. I don't remember. We never see him again. It doesn't matter. And also, just to clarify, the elves awaken like here, like very east Middle Earth, and they're trying to get like all the way over here. So it's kind of complicated. It's a very long migration to Valinor. So, of the groups that do decide to go, we have Ingwe's Vanyar, who are very good little boys and never do anything, which also means that they're not in any stories, so we don't have to worry about them. That's why Ingwe doesn't get a photo. Finwe's Noldor, who we'll get into. And then Thingol leads the Teleri, who like music and water and trees and stuff or whatever. They're all going over to Valinor. And Ingwe's Vanyar get to Valinor. Finwe's Noldor get to Valinor. The Teleri, okay. They like music, they like water, they like trees. They also are ADHD divas. They get distracted very easily. I don't even remember how many times like the Teleri just like split off and like go somewhere else. They just are like, wow, pretty mountain, and then they stay there for like 10,000 years because, you know. And Thingol, especially as king of the Teleri, is king of the ADHD. And he gets distracted by like a pretty woman on the way, which we'll get into later. So Thingol also like never makes it to Valinor. There is a portion of the Teleri that do make it to Valinor. But like most of the Teleri kind of split off and create their own little groups in Middle Earth, which we'll get into later, but we're focused on Valinor right now. We'll get back to Middle Earth. But the main thing to know is some of the Teleri get to Middle Earth. Don't worry about the Vanyar. And the Noldor, led by Finwe, get to Middle Earth. I mean, get to Valinor. They get to Middle Earth later, and they cause some problems. So we're going to start with Finwe. Yay, royalty! Okay, so I know this is a lot, but don't worry, I'll walk you through it. And you don't need to remember every single one of these names right now. I'm just like planting the seeds, so when some of them are important, you'll be like, yeah, I vaguely remember hearing about that, but you don't need to be like, yeah, I get all of it right now in this moment, if you know what I mean. Okay, so as I said, King of the Noldor, Finwe. What does King of the Noldor even mean? I don't even know. Whatever. So Finwe, King of the Noldor. Finwe has a wife, as some do. Her name is Miriel, and they have their first son, Feanor. And Feanor is often considered one of the greatest of the elves, like skill-wise, not like personality-wise. But his soul burns so hot and so brightly that it actually like burns up Miriel and kind of kills her. So she goes off. Well, I'm not even okay. At some point I will get into how elf death and reincarnation works. I mean I won't even like put it on this board, but there's a guy called Mandos, and he's a Valar, and he runs like the underworld, basically. That's what you need to understand. And sometimes the elves can be reincarnated on Valinor, but Miriel's like, no, I don't want to be reincarnated. For whatever reason, she's like, I'm done. That was a lot. Pregnancy is hard. So she's just like dead. I'll be making better X's as we go along. I was not really prepared when I started filming this. So Finway's like, okay, my wife is dead, but I also still want to have more children, and also I want another wife. So he gets another wife, which is like a big deal, but like I don't care, so I'm not going to get into it because elves are like super monogamous. But again, I don't care. So with Indis, who is his second wife, she's one of the Vanyar. It doesn't matter. Whatever. With his second wife, he has 2 more sons. The first one is Fingolfin, who's a nice guy, and the second one is Finarfin, who's blonde. Okay. Now, to explain the grandchildren, the main characters that we're going to be following at first, just to let you know, will be Feanor and his children. Everyone else still being set up for later. But I'll go over Feanor first. So Feanor, the oldest son, has 7 children. And they're all boys, which is a lot. And also weird that they're all boys. But okay, whatever. So we'll go through them. Again, you don't have to remember them all right now, but I'm just setting it up. Feanor's first son is named Mithras. Mithras is known for being a very popular sad boy on Tumblr. The second son is Maglor. Maglor is known for being a wannabe indie, sad, emo singer-songwriter kind of guy. Third son, Celegorm. Celegorm is known for, like, being kind of crazy and hunting, and also he has a dog. Yeah. Fourth son, Caranthir. Caranthir is known for being kind of a bitch. Sixth son. Wait. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Fifth son, Curufin. Curufin is known for being just like his father. Daddy's boy. Sixth and seventh sons, Emrod and Emras. They are known for being twins. Not much else you can really do at that point. Okay, we've got them set up. They all have their own little personalities. They all have their own little quirks. We'll see. Fingolfin, second son of Finwe. Good boy. Has nice children. Fingolfin's first son, confusingly, is named Fingon. Fingon is a good boy. Yeah, okay. Second son of Fingolfin, Turgon. Turgon is known for being kind of antisocial. A bit of a wallflower, if you will. First girl, well, unless you count the dead wives, Fingolfin. First daughter, Arathel. Arathel is known for being also a little bit of a wild girl. She's best friends with Curufin and Celegorm. They like go hunting together. Yeah, she has interesting taste in men. We'll see that. Okay. Finarfin, the blonde son of Finwe. Finarfin's first son, named Finrod. Finrod is known for being the bestest boy. Just gonna put that down there right now. This is a Finrod-friendly household. Okay. Finarfin has other sons, Angrod and also Ignor. They're not twins, but I put them together because they're about the same level of importance. They're also there. And Finarfin's first daughter, Galadriel. That's right. First familiar name, probably, if you've not read the Silmarillion. Galadriel. She's super old. She was born way back in before they even started counting the ages. This is not the first age yet. We'll get to the first age. This is just like before. What is it? Time immemorial? Whatever. Before they started counting time, basically. Yeah, she's cool. She's cool. So I know that this is a lot. There's also like great-grandchildren that I put up here just for reference, but like I'm not even going to go over them right now because they just like, they don't matter until they matter. Like that's going to be a lot of these characters is like they don't matter until they matter. So I'm not going to mention them until they matter because you already have to hold a lot of information in your head for this. So if you're ever looking at this and you're like, I don't know what to do, just think about it in terms of Galadriel. This is Galadriel's nice older brother. This is Galadriel's weird uncle. This is Galadriel's grandfather. This is Galadriel's weird cousins. Don't worry about it. Just think about it that way. I made another map of Arda. We'll see if it's helpful. Okay, so Feanor. Feanor is a crafty boy. Feanor likes making things. And Feanor really wants to create something that has the beauty of the 2 trees of Valinor. Here, I'll redraw them for reference. He just wants something he wants to create something with his own hands that will capture just the overwhelming light that comes from these 2 trees. At one point, he even asked Galadriel, his niece, because she has like really pretty hair, I guess. He like asked for some of her hair because he thinks that it like glows with the same light as the 2 trees, and she says no. You know, hate when that happens when your weird uncle asks for your hair. Yeah, anyway, Anyway, so Feanor wants to make stuff that's really shiny. He succeeds. Feanor creates the 3 Silmarils. That's right, title drop. Not really, close to title drop. The Silmarils. Alright, so Feanor creates the Silmarils. They're like his pride and joy. The best thing he's ever created. Don't worry about his sons. And Feanor's very proud of that. And while that's happening, they're all living in Valinor very happily. And the Valar are like, you know what? I forgive Morgoth. Not necessarily I forgive, but like Manwë, the guy I mentioned earlier, he like can't even like conceive of evil. So he forgives Morgoth and lets Morgoth go. So Morgoth's back. Yay! And Morgoth immediately starts causing trouble. He really especially likes the Noldor kind of elves. I mean, I don't know if it's cultural or whatever, but the Noldor are very ambitious, as you might maybe tell from Feanor, who's like, I want to create something that holds the light of like the literal sun and not the literal sun and moon, but you know, the proto sun and moon. We'll get to the sun and moon later. So Morgoth is very much like, yeah, I can mess with them. He especially likes talking to Feanor. And he's like, Feanor, you know, the Valar are bad and they took you away from Middle Earth. And actually the men are going to awaken in Middle Earth. And they're basically taking away your birthright. You should be the one owning Middle Earth. And blah, blah, blah. Morgoth sows a lot of dissent towards the Valar through Feanor and also just the other Noldor. And Feanor doesn't trust Morgoth. He's like, no, go away. But he does still internalize the ideas. He is very suspicious. He grows more and more suspicious of the Valar. He starts creating his own swords, which are not really a weapon that was used in Valinor at the time because it's like a martial weapon. I don't know if that, you know. And Feanor basically starts inadvertently sowing his own dissent towards the Valar amongst his children and amongst just generally the people that he rules. And at one point, Feanor's dad, Finwe, talks to his other son, Fingolfin, and is like, guys, I feel like your brother is like kind of going down this like anti-Valar pipeline. Like, what do we do about that? And Feanor overhears and shows up. He like threatens to kill Fingolfin and is like, you are taking the attention away from my dad. My dad loves me most. Which is bad. You generally don't want to threaten people in Valinor. That doesn't really happen. So Feanor gets like banished or to another part of Valinor. It doesn't matter. Yeah, okay. So Morgoth, of course, immediately starts doing evil stuff. Morgoth goes over to Middle Earth, finds this giant spider named Ungoliant. This giant spider, Ungoliant, is the mother of the other giant spider, Shelob, that you see in Lord of the Rings, Two Towers, or Return of the King, or whatever, depending on your point of reference. Ungoliant really likes eating light. I don't know what it tastes like, but it must taste really good. She's basically like the embodiment of gluttony, I guess. She will like continue just like eating light and like eating gemstones and stuff. So Morgoth is like, I have a plan. What if I get you into Valinor and you can eat the 2 trees of Valinor? And Ungoliant's like, yep, sounds good. So Morgoth and Ungoliant go back to Valinor, and while everyone's distracted, Ungoliant, eats the 2 trees of the 2 treats of Valinor. The treats to her, the 2 trees of Valinor, and darkens Valinor. They no longer have a sun or moon, tree, sun, and moon. And Ungoliant's like, yay! And everyone else, all the Valar, the elves are freaking out. I mean, imagine if a giant spider just ate the sun in front of you. That would be, I'd be pretty freaked out. So the Valar call over Feanor. And the Valar are basically like, okay, the 2 trees that light up our world are dead. Our best hope of relighting them, or like having at least a similar kind of light, is your Silmarils. So are you willing to give your 3 Silmarils to us so we can light the entire continent back up again? And Feanor's like, No. Feanor specifically says, okay, so he says, no, first of all, he doesn't like the Valar. And second of all, Feanor says that these Silmarils are just like his most prized possession. His best creation, again, ignores children. His best creation, and to taketh the Silmarils from Feanor would be akin to killing him. And he says specifically that that would be the first instance of murder in Valinor. And this guy over here, Mandos, remember I mentioned him, he's like kind of king of the underworld, or Valar of the underworld, and also like kind of the Valar of like doom and like prophecy. Mandos hears that comment about murder in Valinor, and he's like, no, Feanor would not be the first murder in Valinor. So that's weird. Okay, anyway, Feanor, the Valar can't force Feanor to do anything, so Feanor's like, no, you can't have my Silmarils, and then he just goes back home. And they're like, okay. So Feanor goes back home, and dun dun dun, what was Morgoth doing at this time? Uh-oh. Committing a bit of murder. Morgoth, while everyone was distracted, has killed Finwe, High King of the Noldor, and Feanor's dad. But more importantly, Morgoth also stole the Silmarils. Yeah, I know, I kind of imagine, like, you know, that scene from Community, like, Feanor is like, I can accept killing my father, but I draw the line at stealing my things. Feanor is very upset. I mean, everyone's very upset. I mean, the Finwe is the first actual murder in Valinor. That's what that meant a few seconds ago. So Morgoth has done this, and has taken the Silmarils back to Middle-earth, where he's rebuilding his domain a bit, and he has laid the Silmarils into his crown, 3 Silmarils. And he's like, yay, pretty! And Feanor is super pissed. So Feanor, who, by the way, because Finwe is dead, and Feanor is his oldest son, Feanor is now the High King of the Noldor, whatever that means. It's some position of power. So Feanor, like, calls together all the Noldor. And Feanor is like, guys, the Valar suck. The Valar took us away from Middle-earth. We should be in Middle-earth, ruling Middle-earth, but now they're going to give it to humans. And you know what? Morgoth himself is a Valar. And so if Morgoth is bad, maybe all the Valar are bad. Anyway, Feanor has been sowing dissent for a while. And so a lot of the Noldor, including Feanor's like relatives, his brothers, his nephews and nieces, are down to go to Middle-earth against the Valar's wishes. The Valar do not want the elves leaving Valinor. So they will go against the Valar's wishes to Middle-earth to basically fight Morgoth to get back the Silmarils. I mean, I don't know how many of the other elves who aren't from Feanor's line care about the Silmarils, but they at least want to like fight Morgoth because he's bad and he just killed their king. So Feanor, specifically, Feanor, along with his 7 sons, swear a binding oath. And they swear under Iluvatar, essentially, that they will kill anyone who is withholding a Silmaril from them, whether they're friends or foe, whether they're family or not, whether they started a fight or not. If someone else has a Silmaril and they don't agree to give it to Feanor or any of his kin, well, they have sworn that they will then kill them. And just to clarify, I mean, it's not like super clear how the binding oaths work in this, but it seems like they still have free will. They're able to break the oath, as in like they would maybe just not kill people. But it's implied that they would have some like bad doom in Mandos, maybe. So that's great. An unbreakable oath of violence was just made. That's cool. That's cool. That's cool. That's cool. That's cool. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Cool. 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 The hosts of the Valar kind of split into 3 groups. There's like Feanor's group, which has his sons, and then just like all the people who go with him, all the other Noldor. There's Fingolfin's group, which has his children and all his followers, and then there's Finarfin's host, which has his children and all his followers. So Fingolfin and Finarfin hang back a little bit. They're like collecting weapons, whatever. Feanor and his group go to find some way to get to Middle-earth. So it is tough because, I mean, the Valar do not approve of this move to Middle-earth. So they're not going to provide transportation. And there's this huge sea between Valinor and Middle-earth. And so Feanor decides to try and ask some of the Teleri for some passage, because remember the Teleri were like the other group of elves that got like super distracted on the way to Valinor, but some of them did get to Valinor and they really like the sea, so they kind of just like live along the coast here, and they build these like beautiful swan ships. And Feanor comes to them and he's like, hey, can we take your ships to go to Middle-earth? And the Teleri are like, no, sorry, but I mean, first of all, we think that this is a bad idea. And also, these swan ships are like our most perfect and unique creations. They are akin to us what your Silmarils are like to you. We can't just give them up. And Feanor's like, okay. He goes back to his sons and he's like, we're gonna have to steal the ships. So Feanor and his sons, and his group in general, I guess, start trying to steal the ships from the Teleri. And this is in the city called Aquilonde, by the way. And they start trying to steal the ships. The Teleri fight back from this theft. They're like throwing rocks at them, maybe pushing them into the water. And Feanor retaliates by pulling out his sword and killing them. Because, again, in his mind, they're withholding his ability to get his Silmarils, which are rightfully his, and therefore, on the conditions of his oath, he needs to kill them, or he has the right to kill them. So Feanor and his group just start murdering the people of Aquilonde, and Fingolfin's group turns up a bit later, and they just see like all this fighting going on, and they don't really know what's going on, but they just have to assume that Feanor's group was attacked first. Like, they think maybe the Teleri are working for the Valar to stop them, because the Valar, again, don't want them to go. And so they join the fight on the side of Feanor and start also killing the Teleri of Aquilonde. And, I mean, I guess eventually it succeeds. I mean, I think Feanor either kills everyone, or enough people that everyone else ran away. And so they're like, okay, what the heck? Finarfin's group shows up later. It seems it's unclear a bit, but they show up after all the violence has been going on, and they're like, what is going on here? First of all, Finarfin, I didn't really mention this, but Finarfin's wife, who's not listed here, she is one of the Teleri from Aquilonde. It's not so that she like dies or anything, but like Finarfin and his kids are like of the kin of these Teleri from Aquilonde, and this group just killed a bunch of those people. And so Finarfin is like, no, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, I'm out of here. And so Finarfin leaves. He just goes back to Valinor. I mean, they're still in Valinor, but he returns to his home on Valinor, and he's like, I'm not going to do this anymore. His kids, Finrod, Angrod, Agnor, and Galadriel, still really want to go to Middle-earth, so they just kind of get absorbed into their better uncle, Fingolfin's group. And so this murder has just occurred, this mass murder. The Valar of Doom, Mandos, shows up. He makes some prophetic, bad-sounding prophecies or whatever. I skip over a lot of that stuff. But he's basically like, yeah, this is the first kin slaying. The slaying of kin against kin, elf against elf. First, I mean, this is the great kin slaying. You know, who's to say if there will be more? Anyway. And so Mandos kind of like puts a little bit of a curse over them. And he also says that any of the Noldor or the elves who still choose to leave Valinor after this kinslaying will be thereby banned from ever returning to Valinor, unless the Valar change their minds. But the main group, aside from Finarfin and some of his people, are still down to go to Middle-earth, even if it means being kept from Valinor forever. But they are at a bit of a loss. I mean, they just killed a bunch of the ship people. There are not enough ships left to carry the whole host over in one go to Middle-earth. There is one other option. There is the stretch of ice on the northernmost point of the world. And it's super north because, again, the world is flat. And it is called the Helcaraxiae, aka the Grinding Ice. And this is basically a path that does connect Valinor and Middle-earth that they could take, except it is basically just like walking across the North Pole, just walking the North Pole, and no really living being has ever taken the Helcaraxiae before, except the Valar and also Ungoliant, the giant spider. So it's a big risk, and it's likely that just all of them will die if they take the Helcaraxiae path. So Feanor decides, okay, it's between all of us taking the Helcaraxiae path or some of us taking the boats. And, maybe we can send the boats back later. So in the night, Feanor takes his son and his most loyal followers, and they take all the remaining ships that were not broken in the fight at Aquilonde, in the Kinslaying, I should say, at Aquilonde. And they take those boats over to Middle-earth. And when they get there, they land in Middle-earth with the boats. And Feanor's oldest son, Maethros, who is best friends with his cousin, Fingon, looks to his father and says, "Okay, Dad, that was great. So who are we sending back on the boats to, carry our cousins back over?" So Feanor laughs in his face and is like, "Yeah, we don't need those. We don't need those people. They're burdens on us. We have all that we need here. These people, they were mad at me for the kinslaying. There was rumors going around, is Feanor really the one to lead us? No, but he's mad about this. He doesn't like that. They don't like that he kills people. So Feanor sets all the boats on fire so they cannot be sent back. And there are some versions of the story where one of the twins, Amrod, actually, I don't even know which one's which, whatever, Amrod is still on ships because Amrod did not like the murder that his family committed and wanted to go back. And so Feanor, purposely or accidentally, it's a little bit unclear, sets the boats on fire with Amrod still inside, burning his own son alive. And that's not the version that's in the published Silmarillion, but it's very dramatic, so we're going to keep it. Boop, boop, bye-bye, Amrod. I hope that's the right one. I don't actually remember which twin is which. So, that's rough. Meanwhile, Fingolfin's group and also Finarfin's children are still back in Valinor, and they see that Feanor has lit the ships on fire because the world is flat, and they have really good vision, so they can see that far. And they're like, okay, Feanor sucks, but we're still determined to go. We could turn back now, but they're determined. And Fingolfin especially just wants to get to Middle-earth so he can beat Feanor up, which I think is fair. So Fingolfin's host decide to take the Helcaraxiae. They take the Grinding Ice. This takes them a while, and a lot of them die on the way because, again, it's basically like walking across the North Pole, including Turgon's wife does die in that. So rip, that is Feanor's fault. A lot of things are Feanor's fault in this story. Feanor, not one to waste time after just killing one of his sons, is like, okay, time to storm Morgoth's fortress. Morgoth is up here or whatever, I don't know. We'll get into it more later. So Feanor and his son storm Morgoth's fortress. They're actually doing okay at first, but Feanor is smacked around by one of the Balrogs and is mortally wounded. And so all his sons, well, all his remaining sons, gather around their father, and with his last dying moments, Feanor reminds them to honor the oath and to kill anyone who withholds Silmarils from them. And then he dies. His soul, Feanor's soul, is so bright and fiery that he doesn't just die. His body bursts into flames and crumbles to ash that blows away in the wind. Bye-bye, Feanor. That's right. All this drama for Feanor to get to Middle-earth and get his Silmarils back, and he lasts for like 2 seconds before he dies. Thanks, buddy. So the Sons of Feanor are like, okay, what do we do now? Morgoth sends word to them, and Morgoth is like, hey, I'm willing to do like a truce or something. Maybe I'll give you one of the Silmarils if you like call off your army or whatever. We can talk. And so the oldest son of Feanor, Mithras, in his infinite wisdom, decides, yeah, I will go treat with Morgoth. Shockingly, he's captured. Mithras is captured. Morgoth ties him up to the top of a building by his right arm, and the rest of the Sons of Feanor are just kind of like, okay, dad's dead, little brother's dead, older brother's tied up on some tower. I don't know what to do next. This is when Fingolfin's group shows up. And not only do Fingolfin's group shows up, but if you remember, Middle-earth is completely dark, except for the stars, because again, Varda is the only one who cares about them. But the Valar, now that their special Noldor are in Middle-earth, I guess, are like, okay, we should give them some light to like help them. Like, we don't want to interfere, but we are going to create the sun and the moon, and we are going to use those to light up Middle-earth. So, as Fingolfin's group is arriving on Middle-earth after their horrible trek through the grinding ice, the sun is rising above them and announces their arrival. Pretty epic. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, whatever. Okay, anyway. Fingolfin is like, where is my brother Feanor? We need to talk. And his sons are like, yeah, he's dead. And also Mithras is like tied to the tower. So, yeah. So, Fingolfin and Feanor's group are just kind of like in an awkward stance. Like, they don't really want to help each other. I mean, Feanor's group at this point, like, are pretty upset with their former dead leader. They want to join Fingolfin's group, but they're like too proud. Whatever. The Noldor, whatever. So, Fingon, a good little boy, again, best friends with his cousin Mithras, who is currently tied to the tower, is like, okay, this is stupid. I'm going to try and heal the rift between Fingolfin's group and Feanor's group by soloing Morgoth's fortress and finding Mithras. So Fingon, he like sings a song to like fight off the orcs. It's a common thing that we'll see. He sings his powerful song. Mithras recognizes the song and takes up the song so Fingon can follow his voice to his location. An eagle comes down to like fly Fingon up to Mithras, because the eagles are here too. And Mithras is like, Fingon, just kill me. And Fingon's like, nope, but we are going to cut off your arm. So in order to free Mithras from where he's tied up, Fingon cuts his right arm off and carries him down back to the group. And so these two return, and Mithras, who would technically be the successor of the High King status, humbly is like, nope, I'm going to give it to my uncle Fingolfin. He's the only real adult around here. And through this act of connection between Mithras and Fingon, the rift between the host of Feanor and the host of Fingolfin is united. And so the groups are now happy together, whatever. Morgoth is okay for now, and they decide that they are just going to, all these elves are just going to move in to this location in Middle-earth that they have just landed on, and that it's near Morgoth, and just kind of settle in and prepare to fight Morgoth in all of their own realms that they're going to establish But in order to do that, they also need to meet the original residents of this location that they have landed in. And that is what we will get into next. So, the elves and us in our story are now in a part of Middle-earth called Belariand. This is where basically the rest of the story of the Silmarillion will take place. It's kind of in like the northwesternmost part of Middle-earth right now. And Morgoth is up here in the north. And to kind of explain the situation in Belariand, we're going to start back when the elves were moving from Middle-earth to Valinor the first time. So if you remember Thingol is the king of Thingol's the former king of the Teleri and definitely the king of ADHD. He's the one who gets distracted. So I'll explain a bit more about that now. So Thingol, when he was leading his host, the Teleri, across Middle-earth, when he ends up in this Belariand-like area, he hears some like birds singing or nightingales or whatever, and comes across this woman, Melian. Except Melian's not really a woman, she's a Maiar. Like, there's Iluvatar, the capital G god, there's the Valar, which are like the lesser pantheon of gods, and then there are the Maiar, which are kind of more like just powerful spirits, nature spirits, I guess. And so Sauron is a Maiar, Balrogs are Maiar, the Sun and Moon are Maiar, Gandalf's a Maiar. There's a lot of things. So Thingol runs into Melian, and she's like singing in Middle-earth or whatever. She likes Middle-earth. And they meet eyes and immediately fall in love and stare into each other's eyes for many, many years. How many years? Unclear. Could be decades, centuries, millennia. But basically, while these two are staring into each other's eyes or whatever, the rest of Thingol's host, or at least the Teleri that were very loyal to Thingol, did not want to travel to Middle-earth without him, so they ended up just waiting in Belariand for these unspecified many years. And eventually, Thingol and Melian emerge from their honeymoon, and they decide to just stay in Belariand. I mean, Thingol did like Valinor, but he doesn't really feel like he needs the light of Valinor anymore, because he's kind of experiencing that through Melian now. He experiences the light through her, because she is from and of Valinor. And so Thingol and Melian start their own kingdom in this forest in Belariand, and this kingdom is called Doriath. Doriath means like fenced city, and that is because Melian, the Maya, has kind of magical powers, I guess, and she is able to create basically what's called the Girdle of Melian. She can create basically a force field around Doriath, so no one can enter unless she wants them to. So that protects them from the dark forces. Even if at this point Morgoth was chained up, he was not there yet, still some of his former forces were there, like orcs, like Sauron. I forgot to mention Sauron before, he'll come in later. Oops, Sauron's here too. Anyway, don't worry about it. So Doriath is very protected. Lots of the Teleri go with Thingol and Melian to Doriath. Lots of them also just kind of scatter amongst Belariand, go and live in their own places, whatever. But the Teleri elves that do stay with Thingol and Melian in Doriath become known as the Sindar elves. Sindar kind of means like gray elf or twilight elf, because they get that name because they're not really like the light elves, like these guys who went to Valinor. They're not really the dark elves either, who have never seen Valinor, because once again, they sort of get like a little bit of Valinor light from Melian. Whatever. So they're the gray elves, the Sindar. And they also speak a different kind of elf language called Sindarin. Don't worry about it. Thingol and Melian also have their daughter, Luthien. Shout out Luthien. Beren And Luthien folks, you'll be very excited to hear about her. She's like considered the most beautiful elf ever. I mean, Tolkien says that about a lot of elves, but like Luthien, she's pretty cool. So yeah, I mean, that's basically the situation in Belariand. There's Doriath is the main kingdom run by Thingol and Melian, and then there's a bunch of other Teleri just around here. And they've just been living in the darkness, but doing pretty well for themselves for the past thousands of years. And of course, as we just mentioned, now a bunch of these Noldor are arriving out of nowhere. Morgoth's back. There's a sun now. A lot's going on. And some of the elves of Belariand originally are pretty okay with this. Some of them even think that the Noldor are emissaries of the Valar because they know about the Valar. They hang out with the Valar also sometimes. But Thingol and Melian, who are very wise and have a lot of foresight, are like, I don't know. I don't know if I really like the vibes of these new elves from Valinor. Something's off about them, but they're not quite sure what exactly. So they're not super in to the idea of letting any of the Noldor get in. Thingol basically says, like, okay, welcome to Belariand. Here's where I live. Here's where my other various peoples live. You can live everywhere else. Take any land that you want that's unoccupied for your efforts to fight Morgoth. I mean, we don't like Morgoth either. But don't encroach on my land. Don't encroach on any of my other people that I protect's land, because he's a little bit of just like the overall protector of Belariand. And, we'll be cool. And also you're not allowed in to my city. Which, I think, fair enough. I don't know. I mean, Caranthir over here, one of the sons of Feanor, says some like low-key prejudice stuff about the Teleri and also like pokes at the children of Finarfin because they're half Teleri, and he kind of like insinuates that he thinks that they're like not as much part of the like Noldor family because they aren't as Noldor. Yeah. Okay, buddy. Classic Thanksgiving, am I right? Anyway, so the sons of Feanor move in around here. The children of Finarfin actually are allowed into Belariand because they are considered of the kin of the Teleri. Actually, their mom, the children of Finarfin's mom, Finarfin's wife, was or is Teleri, daughter of Thingol's brother. So those were the people that were at Aquilonde, where the kinslaying happened. So they also didn't tell Thingol about the kinslaying or about the Oath of Feanor or any of that stuff. They haven't told him about that. But he's still getting bad vibes. But I mean, okay, sure, whatever. Anyway, the children of Finarfin are mostly chill aside from that. They're allowed in. They like it there. Galadriel especially likes it there in Doriath. She thinks it's very nice. And she especially decides to stay in Doriath instead of creating her own realm like everyone else for a couple reasons. For one, she meets her future husband, Celeborn, there. Just gonna stick him there. Yay. She also gets along well with Melian and starts studying like magic and stuff under her. So a lot of the stuff that we see Galadriel doing in Lothlorien, like there's the protective barrier around Lothlorien. Presumably she learned that from Melian's protective barrier. Things like the Lembas Brand she learned from Melian, things like that. So that's cool. Galadriel's in there. And also, while she's staying there, Melian is kind of able to suss out that, like, Galadriel's hiding something about how exactly the Noldor got to Belariand, and through rumors that maybe Morgoth spread, it eventually gets to Thingol, the rumor of the kinslaying. And so he confronts Galadriel and the other children of Finarfin. He's like, okay, so what's this I'm hearing about y'all murdering, like, a bunch of my family members back in Valinor? And the children of Finarfin are like, one of them, Angrod, speaks up and he's like, okay. First of all, the children of Finarfin, we did not specifically kill anybody. Our hands are clean. Yeah, the children of Fingolfin, they did kill some people, but we atoned for our sins by crossing the Helcaraxiae. That was so grueling that we paid whatever we incited through murdering or covering up murder, we paid for on the Helcaraxé. And we probably should have said something, yes, but we didn't want to betray our family. But I will say that, yeah, the Sons of Feanor, they kind of suck, and you're probably right to stay away from them. So, thanks, Angrod. Thingol was like, okay. So, Thingol is like, fine. I'm not gonna... That's really fucked up. But anyway, I'll let you guys stay. Y'all are chill. The children of Fingolfin, they're not necessarily, like, allowed into Doriath, but, like, they're fine. They did go across the ice, whatever. But the children of Feanor, no, I'm not gonna mess with them. No. Nope. And Thingol also bans the speaking of the Elvish language Quenya, which is the language of Elvish that they spoke on Valinor. It's the language that the Noldor speak, and instead says that they can only speak Sindarin, at least in Doriath, which is the Elvish language of Doriath and just generally Belariand in general. So, I mean, there's that. If you know Tolkien, you know that any language shift is like kind of a big deal, but like the main effect that it has is that you will see in reading Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit that a lot of, like 99% of like the place names or the people names or just the Elvish language spoken is Sindarin, not Quenya, because Thingol made this like choice all the way back then to make it like the dominant language. Cool. Honestly, I would have been even more mad, but okay. So Galadriel's sticking in Doriath. Finrod, oldest son of Finarfin, also really likes Doriath. He especially likes its architecture. And I just realized I forgot to mention, when Thingol and Melian were creating Doriath, they kind of built it into a mountain a little bit and has much like underground tunnels. And they built it this way with basically by making a deal with the dwarves, because at some point in all this, dwarves awoken, and these were like the local dwarves that like live in the Blue Mountains. And so the people of Doriath aren't like necessarily besties with the dwarves, but like they have a working relationship. And so they helped build Doriath. And Finrod really likes how Doriath is built, so he goes and talks to the dwarves, and he gets along super well with the dwarves because Finrod is like super friendly and everybody loves Finrod. And so Finrod goes and creates his own kingdom, built entirely underground with the dwarves, called Nargothrond. And it's like here-ish, I don't know, spitballing. And because the dwarves just like Finrod so much, because what's not to like, they make a very special necklace for him called the Nauglamir. This will be important later. I'll just like put it under here. You don't have to worry about it now. This will be important like way later. Anyway, so Finrod is in Nargothrond, has his own kingdom, underground, very cool. One more kingdom we have to care about. There's a lot of like realms established, but there's really only 3 we need to care about: Doriath, Nargothrond, and one more. So, remember Turgon? He's one of the sons of Fingolfin. His wife died along the way in the Helcaraxé. He's like kind of depressed right now. So Turgon's dealing with whatever, and he gets a vision from one of the Valar called Ulmo. I haven't mentioned Ulmo yet, but Ulmo is kind of a big Valar because he's the one who interacts with the elves the most. He kind of ignores the whole like very little intervention policy that the Valar tend to have, and he's like, yeah, no, whatever. I'm gonna help these guys. They're my friends. I'm gonna do what I can. So Ulmo, and he's like the Valar of the water, by the way, if you can tell by the fact that he looks like a fish. So Ulmo talks to Turgon, and he sends him some message that's like, you're gonna build a very powerful kingdom that is hidden, and it's gonna be very helpful to stopping Morgoth, but don't get too attached. Which is honestly how I feel explaining this to Silmarillion. Like, here's all these characters. Don't get too attached. But also Ulmo says to Turgon that Turgon needs to leave a set of armor wherever this conversation is taking place. So one day, like hundreds of years from now, Ulmo can send Turgon a messenger who will be wearing the armor with some sort of message from Ulmo about kind of the end of the war. And that's how Turgon will know that that's from Ulmo. So Turgon does that. And basically overnight, convinces a bunch of Noldor and Teleri or Sindar or whatever to go with him and establish the hidden city of Gondolin. Looks familiar, maybe? It's like up here or whatever. Nargothrond is hidden in the sense that like Morgoth doesn't know where Nargothrond is, but Gondolin is hidden in the sense that like no one knows where it is. Like, I don't know, Fingon just like looks around one day and it's like, where's my brother? And also Arthel went with Turgon too, so like, where are my brother and sister? I don't know. Okay, so Turgon's over here in Gondolin. Yay! So as I said, basically everyone else of the Noldor group established their own realms, but they don't really matter as much as these three main ones. But yeah, so everyone is kind of like living in like sort of a watchful peace, not really watchful peace, but like in preparation, in order to fight Morgoth again someday for like a few hundred years. So I'm going to go over some stuff that happens before the next big battle. And the main thing that is important to mention is the coming of men into Belariand. So it is said that when the sun first rose on Middle-earth with the coming of Fingolfin, his host, that is when the men first awoke. And kind of like the elves, they awoke in the very east of Middle-earth. And they heard word of like goodness and peace or whatever in the west. So a bunch of the men in groups started migrating towards the west and eventually made it to Belariand. And there are three main houses of men named after their leaders or progenitors, kind of, whatever. And that is the House of Beor, the House of Hador, and the House of Haleth. It was led by a woman. Yay! So the House of Beor is the first one that gets over the mountain, and Finrod is the first to discover them. Finrod is just wandering around doing whatever he does, and he comes across a group of the men, led by Beor, who are like playing some songs on their ukulele or whatever around a fire. And Tolkien makes sure to point out that the music is not very good. So the men go to sleep, and Finrod, ever friendly, takes up Beor's lyre, I think it is, and plays a beautiful melody for them. And the men wake up and they're kind of just in awe. I mean, this is the most beautiful music they've ever heard, and Finrod is like the physical embodiment of like rainbows and sparkles. So like I'd be pretty shocked too. And Finrod makes friends with these humans, learns a bit about their past. Basically, they came from the east. They're very vague about their past. I mean, it's kind of insinuated that they had some run-in with Morgoth or maybe one of his followers, like Sauron. But they aren't very clear about it. But whatever. The humans are welcomed into Belariand for the most part. Most of people welcome them. And a lot of the groups just kind of like split off and go kind of basically live with and serve under the various elf kings. So a lot of them split up like that. And specifically, Beor, the leader of the house, goes and lives with Finrod in Nargothrond, it is said, until the end of his life. So, you know, they were roommates. Happy Pride! If you ask me, I mean, I think Finrod and Beor are like the first elf and human couple in Middle-earth history that we know of. Should I just like use this as a pointer for the rest of the episode? I think that'd be funny. Episode? This isn't a TV show. So yeah, now we have men. I will mention one more story about the men that I quite like a lot. It's probably one of my favorite pieces of written Tolkien texts. It's called the Atherbeth. And essentially, one of Galadriel's brothers, Angrod, falls in love with a woman from the House of Hador, I think, or something like that. Or maybe it's Beor. I don't know, it doesn't matter. Her name is Andreth. They have an interesting romance. But the Atherbeth that Tolkien wrote is basically a philosophical dialogue between Finrod and the mortal woman Andreth. And it is just about like the elf immortality, human mortality, life, darkness, things like that. It's just like, it's really good. It's really incredible. It's like one of my favorite Tolkien texts ever. So I highly recommend. But I won't get into it too much now because it's kind of beyond explanation, but very good to experience for yourself. There's one more story I will tell about this kind of peaceful time in Belariand before kind of shit hits the fan. So when Turgon went off to establish Gondolin away in the mountains with secretly, he also went with his sister Arathel. So Arathel and Turgon are like hidden in Gondolin, but Arathel is not really the like sit and wait around kind of type of woman elf. And she is like, you can't keep me trapped here. I'm not your servant. I'm your sister. Like, treat me like an equal, which, so true. And she demands that she wants to go, and she wants to go visit her cousins, Celegorm and Curufin. And Turgon's like, oh, okay, whatever. You can go off with some guards and go meet them, but come right back, or whatever he says. And so Arathel goes off. She goes to Celegorm and Curufin's realm. I don't even know where it is. Like, whatever, it's here. Celegorm and Curufin are not there at the time, so she just kind of like wanders off into the woods again. And she runs into this elf guy, one of the dark elves, named Eöl. And Eöl is like a former Sindar who doesn't like the sun and doesn't like the Noldor. He thinks that they all brought Morgoth to Belariand and like Belariand before they came, whatever. So he's like, Eöl's like isolated out in the woods. But Arathel runs into him, and because she has terrible taste in men, see Curufin and Celegorm, she decides to marry this guy. One thing about Eöl is he kind of sucks. So to explain, Eöl apparently also knows magic. I don't know. So Eöl saw Arathel wandering around in these woods and wanted her. And so he cast some enchantment to like basically make her keep going in circles and not be able to find her way out of the forest until she ended up like at his hut or his house or whatever. And then they get married. I mean, I think she likes him. Again, bad taste in men. But he essentially like doesn't let her go out in the sun with him, doesn't let her talk to her family members, tell any of her family members where they are. Which, I mean, like, when Celegorm and Curufin like come back and figure out that Arathel has gone missing, they both decide to just not tell anyone because they don't want to get in trouble with Turgon or Fingon or Fingolfin. So, goes to show them what they care about her. Thanks, guys. And so Arathel is basically totally cut off from her family for like many, many years. And during that time, the two of them have a son named Maeglin. #emo-boy. I'm honestly surprised Maeglin doesn't have, well, actually, I think I know why Maeglin doesn't have as much as a Tumblr following. Anyway, so Arathel, Eöl, and Maeglin are out living in the woods, and eventually Arathel is like, okay, I'm like tired of living in the woods, like this is stupid, I want to go just like see my family. But Eöl is like low-key possessive and controlling and toxic. Yay! So Arathel has to wait for Eöl to leave, and she and Maeglin, who's like now, I guess like a teenager, a young adult in elf terms, so it's probably been a couple hundred years, escape and somehow find their way back to Gondolin. Eöl comes back, pissed that they're gone, looks around, knows that she's close to like Celegorm and Curufin, I guess, so he goes to Curufin's realm, runs into Curufin, who is there now, and Eöl's like, hey, I'm Arathel, your cousin's wife, so we're basically kin, and you have to tell me where she is. And Curufin is like, no, bad vibes again, okay, whatever. I'm not going to tell you where she is, you can leave, but I'm not going to kill you, because that's against the laws of the elves, and I don't want to start any drama. Right, Curufin, murdering your elfkin is against the laws of the elves. Right, since when did we care about that? I mean, come on, like, okay. Curufin kills so many innocent people over the course of the Silmarillion, and the one time he had the chance to like deal with like an actually bad guy and like stop a lot of problems that eventually come from this, from leaving him alive, he's like, oh, I don't want to like start new drama. So like, okay. When we get to Beren and Luthien, you'll understand why I'm dogging on these two so much. Like, don't even, whatever. Okay, Eöl somehow tracks Arthel and Maeglin into Gondolin. I don't know. Eöl is captured at the gates of Gondolin, brought in to see Turgon. Arthel and Maeglin are also there, and Eöl is like, oh, that's my wife, that's my son, I own them, whatever. Turgon's like, yeah, okay, so I can't let you leave because Gondolin is supposed to be hidden. We need to keep its location secret. So you can either join our society and just like live with your wife and son here and never leave Gondolin again, or we'll have to kill you. And Eöl very dramatically is like, then I choose death, but I will also kill my son because he's mine and it's my right to kill him. And so he throws a poison spear at Eöl. I don't know where he got the poison. How did he get the poison spear through Gondolin TSA? I don't know. Don't worry about it. He throws the poison spear at Eöl. At Maeglin. My God. Arthel jumps in front of Maeglin to save her son, takes the poison spear, and dies from her wounds slowly later. Rest in peace, Queen. Of course, after this, Turgon is like, okay, we're gonna kill this Eöl guy. So they're going to throw him off the roof. Maeglin is watching Eöl his dad about to be executed. Eöl like cursed him or something, saying like, you're gonna die the same way that I'm gonna die. Whatever. And they throw Eöl off the roof. Okay, by the way, my X's look so much better now. I had to watch a YouTube video about how to make X's out of paper. So, Maeglin just watched his two parents die over the course of like 2 days. Very traumatized, I'm sure, but he gets to move into Gondolin. Things aren't so bad, and Maeglin's very happy in Gondolin. He also really likes his cousin. So I haven't mentioned her yet, but Idril is Turgon's daughter. She's pretty cool. She has a lot of foresight. And so she immediately does not like Maeglin's vibes. Maeglin is like obsessed with Idril, again, his cousin, and basically is romantically in love with her and wants her for himself. So that's generally not accepted, and again, Idril just doesn't like his vibes anyway. So Maeglin's kind of stewing in his incel rage in Gondolin, and that is kind of where we're at in terms of our contexts to get ready for the next battle. Because the elves have been chilling in Belariand, and they're like preparing for a battle with Morgoth, but they're like not in a rush. As far as I know, Morgoth isn't doing anything in that tower of his. They were wrong. So what happens next is called the Battle of Sudden Flame. And that is because all of a sudden, when the elves in Belariand think that things are all peaceful and stuff, Morgoth unleashes his forces from his fortress. And he also unleashes basically rivers of lava, burning up the lands around here. In this initial strike, both of Galadriel's brothers, Angrod and Aignor, die. RIP. And a bunch of the other elves, mainly the sons of Feanor, lose their land. Specifically, Celegorm and Curufin lose their land and move in with Finrod and Nargothrond. Finrod is also almost killed in this battle, but a descendant of Beor, remember Finrod's boyfriend, who's dead now, which I'm sure was a shock when the elves first realized that the humans died like that. But anyway, Beor's descendant, Barahir, saves Finrod's life. And Finrod makes a promise to him. And I haven't mentioned this before, but there's a conversation that Finrod and Galadriel have, where Finrod reveals that he did not marry his elf girlfriend back in Valinor because he foresaw that he would need to make an oath to someone that he would need to devote his whole self to. And this is the oath that Finrod makes. Finrod swears to Barahir that he will help him and any of his kin, his descendants, with anything. And Finrod symbolizes this oath by giving Barahir a ring. The Ring of Barahir, you might remember that being mentioned in the extended edition of Two Towers, if you've seen that. So just to review, Finrod did not marry his girlfriend because he needed to make a lifelong promise to another man, which he symbolized through giving that man a ring. Okay, cool. So that happens. So another thing that happens during this Battle of Sudden Flame. There are two men, I think of the House of Hador, whatever, it doesn't matter, named Hurin and Huor. I don't have photos for them right now. But Hurin and Huor do some like valorous things and are almost killed, but they're saved by an eagle and brought to Gondolin. And they stay there for a bit, and also, Huor is like 13, by the way, which I just think is funny. Turgon really likes Hurin and Huor, and he wants them to stay, but they are eventually like, okay, we live really short lives, we want to spend the rest of our lives with our people, but we love you very much, and we promise not to tell anyone about Gondolin. And Turgon's like, oh, okay, that's fine. And so he lets Hurin and Huor fly out on eagles, and indeed, they do not tell anyone about the location of Gondolin. They don't necessarily know where it is anyway, but they just know that it generally exists, which piques Morgoth's interest, because Morgoth really wants to know where Gondolin is. He's very freaked out about that. So we have Hurin and Huor wandering around now, and they kind of know where Gondolin is. The main thing that happens during this battle is that the king, Fingolfin, hears about all this destruction. He hears about the death of his nephews, Angron and Agnor. He hears about how the sons of Feanor all lost a bunch of their territory and are like scattered now, and a lot of the men have died, things like that. And Fingolfin is just like horrified by this destruction, and he kind of panics, I guess, thinking that this will be like the end of the Noldor. And he decides to take his horse and ride up to Morgoth's fortress, bang on his front gates, and challenges Morgoth to a duel of single combat. Again, Morgoth, the most powerful Valar ever, and Fingolfin. Morgoth, I probably kind of like laugh and be like, oh, this will be so easy, haha, and steps out, towering above Fingolfin, wielding his massive hammer, and he and Fingolfin fight. But it's not actually as easy as Morgoth would have hoped. Fingolfin manages to make like 7 strikes against Morgoth. He manages to get Morgoth in the ankle with his sword, wounding him. And Morgoth is just like taking like way longer than it should to kill this one elf. But Morgoth does eventually manage to like crush down Fingolfin and kill him. And Morgoth is going to try and like desecrate his corpse by throwing Fingolfin's body to the wolves, but one of the eagles flies down, scratches Morgoth across his face, and picks up Fingolfin's body, carrying it to Gondolin so Turgon can properly bury his father. Rest in peace, King. So Morgoth's forces don't really cheer this on as a victory. I mean, it technically was a victory, but it was like way more difficult than it should have been. And from this point on, Morgoth is like, has a permanent limp from the wound that Fingolfin gave him, and his face is permanently scarred from the claws of the eagle. And it is said that Morgoth never again left the gates of his fortress for the rest of time. Like, he was so freaked out about this battle with Fingolfin, where he was not as strong as he thought he should be, or the elves were more strong than he thought they should be. So this is basically where we are after the Battle of Sudden Flame. Morgoth's forces are eventually pushed back, but a lot of land has been lost and some lives have been lost. And now Fingon is the king of the Noldor, and RIP, and a lot of the elves are basically scattered around. Okay, now dare I say we're getting to the good stuff. I mean, it's been good, but now we're getting to Beren and Luthien. Following the Battle of Sudden Flame, a bunch of the humans are wandering around, including Barahir, the guy who just saved Finrod, and his kind of group, and Barahir's son, Beren. Barahir and Beren are wandering around the woods. Beren is off doing whatever, but Barahir and his crew are suddenly attacked by orcs, and Barahir's arm is chopped off with the ring still on it. Beren comes across this carnage, somehow gets the idea to take the ring off his dead dad's fingers, and starts just wandering around the woods. And Beren is wandering very near to Doriath, especially the force field of Melian that's around Doriath. And Melian before has foresaw that even though Thingol did not at first allow humans into Doriath, because Thingol is just not going to deal with all that, Melian foresaw that there will be one day a man who will be able to break through her force field and get through. And that man is Beren. He somehow just manages to wander into Doriath. And as he is wandering through Doriath, he comes across music and follows the music to find Luthien, the elf princess of Doriath, daughter of Thingol and Melian, and she is just dancing among the woods with the nightingales. And Beren is just so overtaken by her beauty that he calls out to her and calls her Tenuviel, which is the Sindarin word for nightingale. I don't know if Beren even knew Sindarin, but it's just kind of a bit of a running theme in some of Tolkien's works where lovers will just be will just have some knowledge of a name that they will impart onto the person that they love. That'll be a very meaningful name for that person. So Beren calls out to Luthien. She's freaked out at first and runs away. But then she's kind of intrigued, and she comes back and meets up with Beren, and they kind of just meet each other a few times throughout the woods of Doriath without telling anyone for a few years, and eventually they fall in love. Luthien has a friend named Dairon who plays music or whatever, but Dairon also secretly has a crush on Luthien, or maybe not so secretly, and he's kind of upset about this. Not just because, he's jealous, but also it's probably what do you mean you're in love with a man? He's gonna die in 2 years or whatever. So Dairon snitches to Thingol. I forgot to put Beren up here. Boop. Hi, Beren. So Thingol brings in Beren. He's what do you want with my daughter? And Beren's well, I want to marry your daughter. And Thingol's how over my dead body? But not actually. Actually, you can marry my daughter if you are to go up to Morgoth, steal a Silmaril from his crown, and present it to me in your hand. Obviously, this is meant to just be a suicide mission, but Beren's okay. Low-key kind of weird that you're selling away your daughter for a jewel. It's year 400 of the First Age, just saying, kind of old school. That's a little bit paraphrasing, but Beren does actually pretty much say that. And I appreciate Beren. He's very snarky. I like that. And Thingol's okay, whatever. So Beren goes off to actually try to track down the Silmaril. Luthien, of course, has no faith in him, because why would she? She's that's crazy. He's gonna die. She's super depressed. Thingol, locks her in a tower, like Rapunzel, because, I don't know. Thingol, I've been on your side, buddy, but he starts to lose it a little bit here. Beren's, wandering around God, how do I get a Silmaril from the most powerful Valar in the world? He somehow makes it to Nargothrond. Beren's just king of just wandering into places. Meets up with Finrod, and Finrod's oh, that's an interesting ring you have on your finger, the ring of Barahir. You must be the son of Barahir. And Beren's yep. And Finrod's well, then I'll help you with anything. Honestly, I think Finrod would have helped anyway, because that's just the kind of guy that he is. So Finrod, a couple of elves, and Beren go off to try and get the Silmaril from Morgoth. As I mentioned a bit before, Celegorm and Curufin lost their land during the Battle of Sudden Flame, so they moved into Nargothrond with Finrod, because Finrod's nice like that and lets them sit on his couch, or sleep on his couch, but they suck. And so they're yeah, Finrod, go, we'll just take care of things while you're gone. But they're totally planning to take over Nargothrond, and they're out wandering one day, and Luthien manages to break out of the tower her dad put her in by like climbing her hair. Again, it's like literally Rapunzel. She somehow manages to escape, and she runs into Celegorm and Curufin. I think specifically she runs into Celegorm's dog, who I haven't mentioned yet, or maybe I did mention briefly. So Celegorm has a dog named Huan. Huan is like a very special Valinor dog, so he can like live. He's also immortal, I guess, or just like very long living or whatever. Huan runs into Luthien, and Huan leads Luthien to Celegorm and Curufin, who are like, oh, a lost lady, yes, we'll help you. Nope, they kidnap her. Because Celegorm is like, wow, she's really pretty, I want her to be my wife. And Curufin is like, yeah, okay, yeah, totally, Celegorm, do that, yeah. And then we can like claim that if you marry Luthien, then you have some sort of like right to Doriath, and then I can take over Nargothrond while Finrod's away, and you can take over Doriath. What a great idea. So yeah, they kidnap Luthien, lock her up in Nargothrond. Huan is like, wow, that was kind of fucked up of my humans to do that. Or not humans, elf, whatever. And Huan overhears Luthien like lamenting and singing about Beren and how much she loves Beren and how sad she is and how she doesn't want to be locked up and forced to marry Celegorm. And so Huan breaks Luthien out, and Huan and Luthien sneak out of Nargothrond to go and find Beren. Meanwhile, Beren and Finrod and their host have been looking for Morgoth, I guess. I don't know. But they somehow run into Sauron. Again, I forgot to mention that Sauron is here. Sauron is doing stuff. Sauron is a servant of Morgoth. That's right. The big bad of Lord of the Rings right now is just the man servant of the real big bad, which is Morgoth. So Finrod and Beren run into Sauron. Finrod and Sauron kind of have this like sing off. I don't really know, like, I think it's partially telepathic, partially singing, and Finrod's like kind of winning, but then Sauron like reminds Finrod about the kinslaying, and Finrod like feels really bad and then can't sing anymore, and they get captured. And Sauron is like evil and mean, so Sauron is slowly like killing off each of the like elves that went with Beren and Finrod by feeding them to his wolf. And eventually, Sauron really only cares about Finrod. He doesn't care about any of these other guys. So Sauron is going to feed Beren to the wolf. But Finrod, like, breaks his chains and then tackles the wolf and kills the wolf with just, like, his hands and his teeth. But the wolf also manages to kill Finrod in that moment. And so it is then just Beren left with the dead wolf and all the dead elves and the dead Finrod. And he is just heartbroken because me too! Damn. Finrod, my goat, he was the nicest elf you'll ever know. Everyone loved him. The dwarves loved him. The elves loved him. The men loved him. Many men loved him. He killed the wolf with his teeth. That's crazy. He sang to Sauron. Whatever. Rest in peace, my goat. So Luthien and Huan also somehow track Beren down to Sauron's fortress. And Luthien and Huan fight Sauron. Sauron turns into a werewolf, or I guess he just like turns into a wolf. And Sauron and Huan have like a wolf battle, but Luthien like trips up Sauron because she like sings a song that like makes him pass out or something. So they sneak past Sauron. That's right, Sauron was just beaten by Luthien and Huan. You don't even worry about Sauron. And Luthien finds Beren. Beren's like in shock because like he just watched Finrod die, which is probably like watching a unicorn die. But Luthien manages to heal Beren, and she and Beren and Huan managed to sneak out of Nargothrond. Huan returns to Celegorm because Huan is still loyal to his elf companion, but as Beren and Luthien are wandering around, they run into Huan, Celegorm, and Curufin again, and once again, Celegorm and Curufin try to kidnap Luthien. Beren, of course, tries to stop them. I think he manages to take down Curufin, or like take down his horse or something. And Huan is also like, this sucks. Okay, like I've been your pup for many years, Celegorm, but I draw the line here. And so Huan like turns on Celegorm and like scares him away and goes to stay with Beren and Luthien. And Celegorm and Curufin like go off licking their wounds or whatever. Also, I think in this time, once the news that Finrod had died had reached Nargothrond, Angrod's son, Orifer, takes over Nargothrond and kicks Celegorm and Curufin out. Curufin also has a son named Celebrimbor, who won't come up again, but he's notable for creating the Rings of Power, like the 3 elf rings, and all the others. So, you know, there's that. And Celebrimbor does not like his dad. He's also like, bye, Curufin. And also, if you read the Silmarillion and you're like, why did she just say that Orifer was Angrod's son? Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. With Tolkien, there's a lot of different versions of various stories, and there's especially a couple versions of like who Orifer is and who some other characters are. And I'm going to go with versions that are not accurate to the published Silmarillion, but are more accurate to other versions of Tolkien's text that I think are better and more accurate in the long run. So I'm just going to go with those. So just don't worry about it. So Luthien and Beren are wandering around with Huan. They're kind of like living their best life. I mean, they have a dog. What's not to love? But Beren is like, okay, I still do kind of want to get that like bride price for you. Like, I still do want to marry you, and I want to return to Doriath and like show Thingol that we got the Silmaril. And Luthien's like, okay, yeah, we can go try to steal from Morgoth. I mean, we just beat Sauron, so like we can do anything. So Luthien, Beren, and Huan go to Morgoth's fortress. They sneak in. Luthien sings a song that puts the entire fortress asleep, including Morgoth. And Beren goes, gets a knife, and chips out a Silmaril from his crown. But it is so difficult that I think the knife like shatters and cuts Morgoth's face. So Morgoth wakes up again. And they're like, okay, time to get out of here. Beren grabs the Silmaril. Beren and Luthien run out with the Silmaril, but Morgoth sends one of his giant wolves. What's the wolf's name again? The wolf's name is Karkaroth. And Beren like shines the Silmaril at Karkaroth, because Karkaroth doesn't seem to like the light of the Silmaril. But, as many dogs do, he overcomes the confusion and bites off Beren's hand, holding the Silmaril, and swallows it. So, the Silmaril inside Beren's hand then burns Karkaroth's stomach, and Karkaroth freaks out and runs away, and Beren and Luthien and Huan manage to get away. And they do eventually return to Doriath, and Luthien and Beren go up to Thingol, and Thingol's like, oh my god, I'm just glad that you're alive. What's going on? And Beren's like, well, let me tell you, right now, I have the Silmaril in my hand. Ha! You're gonna find that funny when I explain what the hell is going on. Again, Beren, great sense of humor. I see why Luthien likes him, you know? I mean, he's pretty funny. So Thingol hears their story and is very sympathetic, and he's like kind of overcome his misgivings about Beren, and he's like, okay, you guys can get married. Like, that's fine, you make her happy. That was kind of funny, the hand thing. Karkaroth is still running around Belariand with the Silmaril burning its stomach. And they're like, okay, this is kind of threat. And Beren still kind of wants the Silmaril to like really solidify this marriage. So Beren and Thingol and a couple others go out to hunt Karkaroth. They manage to find Karkaroth. Oh, and Huan. Huan's also there. And Huan and Beren take down Karkaroth, but Karkaroth also kills them in turn. There's a lot of, like, killing each other in these stories. Rest in peace, Huan. You were a good dog. There are no bad dogs. So Beren is dying, and Thingol takes the Silmaril out of Karkaroth's stomach and places it in his hand, solidifying his union to his daughter, Luthien. They bring Beren's body back to Luthien, and Luthien is overcome with sadness, and she kind of wills herself to die. And this is where I will talk about Mandos. I've mentioned Mandos a little bit. I'll explain it a little bit again now. So Mandos rules kind of the underworld. It's called the Halls of Mandos, or the Halls of Waiting. Basically, when elves and men die, their like souls go to the Halls of Mandos, and they basically wait there. And the elf souls can either wait there forever, like Feanor's mom did. Sometimes they can be forced to wait there forever if they've done something bad. That's what happens to Feanor, or they can choose to be reincarnated back in Valinor. So this is essentially to say that elf souls don't ever really die. They are like actually very immortal in that sense. Human souls kind of, after waiting a while in Mandos, do go off somewhere else and no one knows where. So Luthien goes to Mandos while Beren's soul is still there and sings to Mandos about her plight, about how much she loves Beren, about their tragedy. And Mandos is so moved that he decides to alter fate a little bit for them. He gives Luthien a choice. He says that Luthien can choose to be reincarnated right now back on Valinor, and he will remove her memories of Beren so she won't remember the sadness and the grief. Or Luthien can choose for her and Beren to both be reincarnated back on Middle-earth right now, but both Beren and Luthien will become mortal. Luthien will no longer be an elf. She will die, and when her soul goes back to Mandos, it will not be reunited with any of her elf family. It will go off and just wherever humans go. And of course, Luthien decides to choose mortality. She decides that both her and Beren will be reborn back in Doriath, but they are both mortal now. And so they're back together, but they decide to not stay in Doriath. They go like over here somewhere, I don't know. They go to live with the Green Elves, basically, and live their best life. They have a son named Dior. No relation to the like skin cream or clothing company or whatever. And Dior is an elf. Basically, how this Mandos thing will work is that any kind of elvish descendants from Beren and Luthien will then get to choose whether they want to have the fate of elves, live forever, and then their souls will also live forever, or if they want to have the fate of humans, where they will eventually die of old age, and then their soul will go somewhere else. And that is the story of Beren and Luthien. I mean, I think it's pretty fun. I don't know if I did the best job of conveying how dramatic it is at times, but I mean, Luthien like takes down Sauron and Morgoth with her dog and like singing. We lost Finrod along the way, and that is tough. That is tough to deal with. He was the goat in many ways. But another very important thing that happens is the taking of one of the Silmarils from Morgoth, and now the Silmaril is in the hands of Thingol in Doriath, specifically. And, yeah, this will not necessarily be a good thing in the long run. Hello, it's a different day. Beren and Luthien are off doing their thing. Thingol has a Silmaril, and Mithras, son of Feanor, is hearing this, and he's like, okay, so Morgoth was just stolen from by, like, an elf, her, like, weird boyfriend, and their dog. So, like, maybe Morgoth is kind of weak right now. I think this is the time to, like, strike back. So Mithras tries to make a union between basically all the forces in Middle-earth that are combating Morgoth. So Mithras teams up with Fingon, of course, the other son of Fingolfin. He can team up with his brothers. He teams up with a lot of the dwarves that live in the Blue Mountains here. He teams up with a lot of the men in Belariand. He also teams up with a lot of new men that have come in Belariand. Also, more recently, some men from the east. And that's about it, because Orodreth, who is currently the king of Nargothrond, is still pissed at Celegorm and Curufin for like trying to take over, getting his uncle killed, things like that. So he's not helping. Some of his people go, but he's not sending his whole team. Thingol as well, still pissed about, again, Celegorm and Curufin trying to kidnap and forcibly marry his daughter, and also the Celegorm is like currently trying to demand the Silmaril that Thingol has, with threat of, attack. So Thingol's just like very mad. Also does not send any people, any like armies. Like a couple people come again, but none of their armies are like setting forth or anything. And Celegorm is like really mad about this. He's like, oh my god, Thingol's mad at me for kidnapping his daughter and threatening to kill him. Well, guess what? If we survive this battle, I swear that I will kill Thingol and all of his people if he doesn't give me the Silmaril. It's like, okay, that's great. Thanks, Celegorm. So, Curufin and Celegorm's actions in Beren and Luthien, like, really messed up the possibility of this attack being able to work, but they still try. The remaining forces, Sons of Feanor, Fingon's people, the dwarves, the men of Belariand, and the new men, they all go to attack Morgoth, and they actually almost start winning, especially when Turgon sends some of his people secretly from Gondolin to go and aid them in the battle. And things are actually looking pretty good. Except Morgoth, once again, had planned for this. And he had actually sown, I guess, spies and traitors into the forces of the new men who had just recently come over to Belariand from the east. And so in the midst of battle, those new men turned on forces fighting Morgoth and starts killing people and causing tons of confusion and chaos and death. So that's not great. A bunch of people are captured. Fingon, unfortunately, is separated from his group. Two Balrogs basically come at him from either angle and unfortunately kill him. Rip Fingon. He was High King for like 2 seconds. He did his best. He's a good boy. I guess, and that kind of leaves Turgon as the next High King of the Noldor. Again, whatever that means. Honestly, at this point, it's more of a death sentence than anything. So Turgon is still fighting in this battle. Some of his friends, his human friends, Hurin, if you remember him, he was one of the brothers that was flown to Gondolin in the last battle, is like, Turgon, you gotta get out of here. As long, this is bad, this is going very poorly, but as long as Gondolin survives and Gondolin is still hidden from Morgoth, that gives Morgoth something to fear. So Turgon evacuates, I guess, and the rest of the forces also retreat, and this was generally just not a success. This battle gets named the Battle of Unnumbered Tears because just so many people died, and this area of Belariand for the next few years is just scattered in corpses and skeletons and things like that. So that's not great. The other important thing that happens during the Battle of Unnumbered Tears is at the end, Morgoth captures Hurin, the man who knew kind of where Gondolin is. And again, because Morgoth is afraid of Gondolin, he basically imprisons Hurin, and Hurin won't tell him where Gondolin is, and is just mocking him. So Morgoth is like, okay, he straps Hurin to a chair where he can see all of Belariand, and curses him to watch it, and he's like, I'm gonna curse your whole family and you have to watch. Or something like that. Unclear, whatever. Morgoth is just really petty about that. So, that brings me in to the story of the Children of Hurin, or the story of Turin Turambar. It's very different in tone from Beren and Luthien. I'll just start with that, but let's just get into it. Okay. So to go back in time a little bit to set up Hurin and his children. So Hurin, I'll just put him here, whatever. Hurin, the guy who went to Gondolin, his brother is Huror. Hurin had a wife named Morwen, as you do. Hurin and Morwen have a son named Turin. And after Hurin is captured by Morgoth, Morwen is freaked out, and just in general, Belariand's really weakened right now, so there's orcs just attacking the cities of men and elves left and right. It's just a really unsafe place to live. So Morwen sends her son Turin over to Doriath for Thingol's protection. Why she told, I guess her options right now, because Turgon is hidden, her only options are the Sons of Feanor, so I can see why she picked Doriath. And Thingol, post Beren and Luthien, is actually a lot more open-hearted and a lot more sympathetic to humans. So Thingol does let Turin stay in Doriath and basically raises Turin Doriath amongst the elves. And also, a little unclear when this happened, but Morwen also has another daughter, Feanor. Turin either never met her or like they were really young when they were separated, and for some reason Morwen didn't send Feanor with him, which is why I think that Feanor was not have been born. I don't know, whatever. It's so Morwen and Feanor are wherever in Belariand doing their own thing, and Turin is in Doriath. And Turin has like friends in Doriath, but they also kind of make fun of him there. Like there's one elf named Saeros, I think, who is making fun of Turin one day and is like, "Oh, your women sleep in barns," or whatever he says. And Turin kind of like has anger issues. I mean, like rough life, daddy issues. His dad's, captured, throws like a glass at him or something. And then Saeros is like making fun of him more. And somehow this leads to Turin convincing Saeros to strip naked and run away from him. And the elf Saeros runs like off a cliff and dies by like falling into the water. I don't know exactly how those chain of events really occurred, but Turin's like, "Oh no, yikes." Another different day, because I recorded the rest of the story and then my microphone wasn't recording audio because it ran out of batteries. So we're going to do it again from the top, not from the top, from where we last left off, which I think is when Turin drove that elf guy naked for some reason off a cliff and then was super worried about it because he didn't want Thingol to find out and assumed that he would be punished. So he ran away from Doriath and like shacked up with some like suspicious men, as it is. And Turin's elf friend in Doriath named Beleg, or really his elf boyfriend, like let's be honest. So Beleg like goes and talks to Thingol about that Turin just ran away and also like accidentally killed that elf guy, and Thingol's like, that's like fine, like no one really liked that elf guy anyway, and also like obviously it was an accident, and Thingol like really likes Turin. Turin's like Thingol's new son now that his daughter left with a man. So Thingol's like, I would have pardoned him anyway. So Beleg's like, okay, I'll go find him, but just tell Turin that, and Turin will come back. And Beleg also brings this like cursed sword with him. I don't know why. I don't know why he doesn't have his own sword already. I mean, he's like a warrior, but he gets this sword from Thingol, which the sword was made by Eol, if you remember, Arathel's nasty husband. And Melian is like, that sword is cursed, you probably shouldn't use it. But Beleg's like, it's fine, I'll use a cursed sword. So Beleg goes and finds Turin. They get back together, I guess, leave the shady men, and Beleg is like, you can come back, Thingol will pardon you, it's fine. And Turin's like, no, because Turin, I think he kind of likes to be miserable a little bit, and Turin's like, no, I shan't go back. So Beleg's like, okay, whatever, I'll stay with you because I love you. So Beleg and Turin are kind of like living on their own in Belariand. They're staying with some shady dwarves now. They're specifically called like the petty dwarves, which I think is supposed to mean that they're just like even more small. I don't really understand the petty dwarf situation, but it seems like they're kind of like an ostracized subspecies of dwarf. I don't know. And they're staying with this one dwarf named Mim. And Mim, through various means, I think is like captured by Morgoth and reveals Turin's location to Morgoth, because remember, Morgoth really wants to like torture Hurin to get the information about Gondolin. So Morgoth wants to find his son Turin to punish Hurin. Keeping that straight, or not straight. So Morgoth attacks wherever Beleg and Turin are. Beleg manages to escape, but Morgoth does capture Turin and is going to bring him to his fortress. Beleg goes after him. Beleg runs into this one elf named Gwyndor, who is an elf originally from Nargothrond. He was one of the few elves from Nargothrond who tried to fight in the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. He ended up being captured by Morgoth and was tortured there, but managed to escape. So Gwyndor's like super traumatized, but Beleg's like, okay, get up, I just need to help my boyfriend. And Gwyndor's like, okay, he's over there. So Beleg and Gwyndor go and like kill the orcs that are like, I guess, like carrying Turin to the fortress, and Beleg goes to like cut the like rope or the shackles that that are holding Turin's arms or whatever, but he accidentally cuts Turin with the cursed sword, by the way. And Turin like wakes up in a start, and it's like he was just attacked, and it's like super dark and stormy, and he can't see anything. So he just grabs the cursed sword and kills Beleg, not knowing that it's Beleg, until the lightning from the storm strikes up ahead and reveals his elf boyfriend's body to him that he just killed. And Turin definitely is like that's my impression of the Ted Nance drawing, which is almost the image that I put for Turin, but I wasn't going to do that to him. So Turin's like traumatized, and Gwyndore's like, okay, like we gotta move. I don't know if they like buried Beleg or anything, but Turin and Gwyndor go back to Nargothrond, where Gwyndore's originally from, and are welcomed there. And if you remember, Nargothrond is currently being led by Orodreth, son of Angrod, brother of Finrod. I think I misproperly called him Orifer. That's a different character. You know how it is. Orodreth has 2 children. I believe his oldest daughter is Findulias, and his younger son is Gil-galad. Again, that's not the version that you're going to find in the published Silmarillion, but this version is better, okay, so don't worry about it. Gil-galad is like off somewhere with like some of the Teleri at the coast for some reason, and Findulias is with her father Orodreth in Nargothrond. Findulias and Gwyndor were actually originally betrothed or like dating or whatever. But when Gwyndor gets back to Nargothrond, I think he's like all scarred and like traumatized, and Findulias is like, ew. No. But Findulias is like super into Turin. She's like, ooh, this like man. And Turin's not interested, but whatever. They can all be friends. Orodreth, the king, current king, is also likes Turin, and he's like, yeah, you can stay. And kind of Turin gives a lot of, I guess, like not military, but like war preparation suggestions. I don't know where he learned that. Bro was just living in Doriath. But they listen to him for some reason. And one of the things that Turin suggests is like building a bridge between Nargothrond and, I don't know if it's like over a mountain range or a moat. I don't quite understand the geography of Nargothrond in my mind and where it would need a bridge. But Turin like suggests a bridge so they can get more supplies. But then that backfires because Morgoth somehow figures out where Nargothrond is and then sends his forces to attack Nargothrond using that bridge. So not a great idea, Turin. So a lot of people die on that attack on Nargothrond. I don't know if it's said specifically. I think it is. But Orodreth, the king, dies. Gwyndor also dies. As he's dying, he tells Turin, like, go make sure that Findulias is safe or something. And that doesn't happen though, because Turin like gets separated from the rest of the group, goes to try to find Findulias later, and finds her like stabbed into a tree by a spear. So yeah, rip Findulias. So Turin once again is very traumatized and deals with this by going off into the woods and ganging up with a bunch of shady men. Meanwhile, in Belariand, for whatever reason, Morwen has decided that she is going to take herself and Nienor to Doriath finally. So Morwen and Nienor go to Doriath. This is like years later, and she's like, okay, Thingol, where's my son Turin that you were going to take care of? And Thingol's like, not my fault, he ran away. And Morwen's like, okay. So Morwen, Nienor, and like a group of Thingol's elves go out to like go find Turin, except they're intercepted by one of Morgoth's dragons. And this dragon is called Glaurung. And in Tolkien's universe, dragons kind of have like enchantment powers. They can like lay spells on people and curses, I guess. So Glaurung attacks them, separates a bunch of them, and specifically targets Nienor. And kind of like shatters her mind. But first of all, erases all of her memory, and then like also drives her a little bit wild, and she like runs off into the woods, not knowing who she is, and like collapses naked. I don't know where her clothes went. There's a lot of, I don't know where people's clothes go in the story. But anyway, Turin and his gang of shady men find Nienor, and they're like, oh no, I have to help this person. Turin doesn't know who she is. Nienor doesn't even know who she is anymore. So Turin saves Nienor, not knowing who she is. And the two of them feel a certain connection with each other that neither of them know how to explain, but it feels like love, and so they get married. What a power couple. And also, I believe the text also says that They have a baby. I don't know if Feanor just gets pregnant or if she actually like gives birth to the baby, but the baby is never mentioned again. So I'm just not going to worry about that. So Turin, Feanor, and their group of shady men are doing whatever in Belariand, wherever they are. Glaurung, the dragon, is still out there, and Turin wants to hunt down Glaurung, so he goes and does that, somehow finds him, attacks Glaurung, they kind of fight each other, and Turin deals Glaurung like a mortal wound, but Glaurung is still conscious enough to like lay a spell on Turin that makes him fall unconscious by his body. Feanor goes after Turin, finds his unconscious body by the dragon and assumes he's dead and is like crying and stuff, like, oh no, my husband. But Glaurung, ever the diva of drama, who is still conscious at this point but dying, looks at Feanor and is like, oh, hi Feanor, good to see you, glad you were finally able to reunite with your brother. And Glaurung the dragon undoes the enchantment on her and returns all her memories, and she realizes who Turin is, and she realizes that she was just married to her brother, who also is now dead, she thinks, and in her despair, she runs away and throws herself off a cliff to her death. Glaurung, after that, after having the time of his life, causing all the drama, does die of his wounds, and the enchantment then, of course, also dissipates, and Turin is able to wake up, and he returns to his group of shady men and is like, where's Feanor? And one of the men, I think his name is like Brandir, whatever, witnessed all of this happen, the whole thing with Feanor, and is like, yeah, actually, your wife is your sister, and also she just killed herself. And Turin's like, why would you say that? And wielding, again, the cursed sword, kills Brandir, and then like, oh my god, I just killed my friend, and runs away again. And Turin, running away, runs into one of the elves from Doriath, who originally tried to escort Feanor and Morwen, and he's like, hey Turin, wow, there you are, we were looking for you for years. And Turin's like, hi, is Feanor my sister? And the elf is like, yeah, that's your sister, wow, did you find her? And Turin's like, yeah. So Turin runs away again, looking at his cursed sword, and he's like, oh my god, I killed my boyfriend, I failed my other friends, I dated my sister killed herself, I killed my other friend thinking he was lying and he wasn't lying, oh my god, my life is so horrible, I'm so horrible, and magic, evil, cursed sword, will you let me die? And the evil sword is like, yeah dude, you suck, because the sword talks. And so, using his evil cursed sword that just talks to him, Turin stabs himself and dies. Sorry, I was in such a flow state describing this horror, I forgot to cross them out. Morgoth, having sown all this destruction, is content with his torture of Hurin and is accepted that at this point Hurin is just not going to tell him where Gondolin is, or at least doesn't know, because at this point, like, he would have said something. So Morgoth lets Hurin go. It's been like 30 years or something. Hurin's like very old now. Hurin is just wandering around Belariand, manages to run into his wife Morwen, who is also quite old now, and I think also maybe was cursed by the dragon. I don't quite remember what happens to her, but she's also just like lost in Belariand. And he's like, oh my god, Morwen, you're never gonna believe what happened to our children. And she's like, yeah, I believe it was bad. Anyway, glad to see you're alive, honey. I'm gonna die now. So she dies. Boop. And Hurin's like, damn. Hurin goes to Nargothrond, which at this point I should actually cross out, because Nargothrond is like basically like demolished. Like, there's no king to take it over anymore. Nargothrond's gone. It's been taken over by the petty dwarf Mim, if you'll remember him. I don't know what he's doing, but he's just like sitting on his laurels, and Hurin's like, you are part of the reason my son, bad stuff happened to him. And so he kills Mim, steals what Mim had stolen, which was the Nauglamir, the big pretty necklace that the dwarves had given to Finrod back when they built Nargothrond together. So Hurin takes the Nauglamir and returns to Doriath and like throws the Nauglamir at Thingol and Melian's feet and is like, here's your price, cause thank you so much for taking such good care of my family. Hashtag sarcasm. And Thingol and Melian are like, okay, like, we feel really bad. We really loved your family, and we seriously did the best that we could, I guess. But, you know, like, you really can't blame us. Like they made their decisions, like, blah. And Hurin's like, okay, fine, that's whatever, I forgive you. I'm gonna go throw myself off a cliff now. And Hurin goes and throws himself off a cliff. I'll just put a big old X over them. So yeah, that's the story of the Children of Hurin. Yeah, it's a good bedtime story, really like calms you down, returns your faith in humanity. And yeah, don't worry about whatever child Turin and Feanor might have had. What really matters at the end of the day is that in Doriath, Thingol now has one Silmaril and the Nauglamir. Recovering from this horrible tragedy that just fell to some humans that he likes, Thingol is like, you know what? This Silmaril is really pretty. This necklace is really pretty. I really want to put them together. So Thingol goes to the dwarves that live nearby that they've worked with a little bit sometimes and is like, hey, work buddies, can you like put the Silmaril in the Nauglamir so I can have a really pretty necklace? And they're like, sure, whatever. So the dwarves do that. Thingol is like really obsessed with the process. And on the day that the dwarves finish this project, Thingol has gone alone to the dwarf mines or kingdom or whatever, and is just watching them work, and they finish it, and Thingol's like, yay, give it to me, gimme. And the dwarves are like, you know what, maybe not, because this is a really pretty necklace, and half of it, the Nauglamir, doesn't even belong to you, and the Silmaril doesn't even belong to you, so like, what if we just kept it, because we made it? And Thingol's like, oh, you promised, you guys are so short, and so below me, mentally and physically, and like he's just like ripping into him, and predictably this doesn't go well as Thingol is alone with the dwarves in their like dungeon, and so the dwarves are just like, okay, fuck you, and they start stabbing him to death. No more Thingol, rip my buddy. And luckily some of the other elves of Doriath also show up for some reason and are able to fight off the rest of the dwarves. I think they kill most except two of them escape. Two of the dwarves escape. And those dwarves go to their other dwarf friends who I guess live in different mountains and are like, oh my gosh, Thingol and Doriath just attacked us. We're going to need to fight back. So that's not great. The elves are not able to save Thingol, but they are able to save the Nauglamir, which now holds the Silmaril. And they bring that back to Melian and are like, oh, my queen, your husband is dead, but here's a pretty necklace. And she's like, fuck that pretty necklace. She's super sad. I mean, obviously. And the thing with Melian, because she is a Maiar, her ability to be like incarnate in Middle-earth as opposed to more like a spiritual being was tied to her marriage to Thingol. So not only is she just like really sad and doesn't really care anymore now that he's dead, but she also like physically can't really stay in Middle-earth anymore. So Melian kind of is spirited away back to Valinor. And that, of course, also means that her protective barrier around Doriath is kaput. They are completely exposed now, which is really not great timing. As I said, the nearby dwarves are told that Doriath was going to attack them, so they attack Doriath and are basically storming Doriath, and there was a big battle between the elves of Doriath and the dwarves, and a bunch of them die, but Doriath is able to survive because Luthien got word of her father's death and her mother's departure and is like, damn. So she sends some of like the green elves that they were living with somewhere around here, and also her husband Beren and their son Dior to go help Doriath. So Beren and Dior show up, they help out a lot, very cool. At the end of it all, Beren goes back to Luthien. I think he brings the Nauglamir with the Silmaril to Luthien as a kind of like, oh, sorry your parents are dead, but here's a pretty necklace, because everyone loves pretty necklaces. But their son, Dior, decides that he will take on leading Doriath, because he is technically the heir of Thingol. So Dior is now king of Doriath. He takes a wife named Nimloth, and they have 3 children. I know this is kind of a weird layout, but there's a purpose to it. Nimloth and Dior's children are named Elwing, who I believe is their oldest daughter, and then they have 2 young twins named Elurin and Elurid, continuing the Tolkien theme of twins twin boys specifically with really similar names. I don't think we ever see twin girls, which is interesting. But yeah, so this is kind of the family of Doriath for a bit. And they're doing okay. Like, they definitely aren't as strong as they used to be with, like, Thingol and the Maya Melian as their king and queen, but they're surviving. But Luthien and Beren, as you remember, are now mortals, and that means that they're going to die mortal deaths. So, out wherever they're living, Luthien and Beren eventually die of old age. Rest in peace, the real king and queen, but that also means that the green elves that were living with Luthien and Beren then take the Nauglamir that Luthien had and return it back to Doriath for Dior or Nimloth to keep. So Doriath once again has a Silmaril, which is not necessarily great because the Sons of Feanor are still kicking around doing whatever they're good for. And they're like, shoot, like, we really need that Silmaril. I'll be real. They were very, like, about taking it from Morgoth because they were freaking scared. And then when it was just lying in Doriath with Thingol, they weren't going to take it because they're at Melian's barrier. And then when it went to Luthien, they weren't going to take it because Luthien beat Morgoth. And if they're too scared of Morgoth, they're real scared of Luthien. But now it's back in Doriath with a bunch of nobody elves and no magic barrier. So they're like, kind of like, this is our chance. They do try. Well, Mithras tries, however hard he really tries, to, like, ask for them to surrender the Silmaril. And again, Dior refuses to surrender it. Like, I mean, I guess they do suck. Like, there's probably a point of pride, but, like, whatever. And Mithras is like, oh, shucks, I tried. But, you know, Caligorm still really doesn't like the Centaur. He really wants that mass murder to happen again. So, like, you gotta do what you gotta do. And so, the remaining Sons of Feanor descend upon Doriath and enact the second kinslaying. And a lot of people die in this battle. Back when I was filming this the first time, I had to pause to cut more X's out. So let's just go through it. First of all, Caligorm, fucking crazy, kidnaps the young twins, Elorun and Elorid, and apparently just, like, leaves them in the forest. And Mithras hears about this and is like, what the hell? Because I guess he's horrified by killing children, which, you know, I wouldn't have guessed based on his actions, but whatever. And goes to try to look for the twins and can't find them. And that's kind of where it's left. Technically, it's just said that they're never found. So they could still be alive, but I think it's meant to be presumed that the two twins, who are also presumably just, like, very young, like possibly even toddlers at this point, who were just left out in the woods, I think it's also, like, during winter or something, are dead. So Caligorm just killed those two kids. Great. Caligorm does get his comeuppance pretty quickly, though, because Caligorm and Dior battle. It's probably very epic, but in that battle, both Caligorm and Dior are killed by each other. Rest in peace, King Caligorm. Hope you're rotting in hell. The other Sons of Feanor that died during this battle, that are just kind of listed, Caranther, the bitch, also dies. I don't know how. Curufin, the other bitch, also dies. It's not said how, which is kind of wild, because I feel like Curufin is, like, kind of a significant antagonist in a couple of the stories, mainly Beren And Luthien, which is a pretty big story. So the fact that we never hear the specifics of how he died is a little bit wild. You might also be wondering where Galadriel and Celeborn are during this time, because they're two pretty big characters who are supposed to be in Doriath at this time, but there's no mention of them. And I believe that the reason for a lot of this vagueness is because Tolkien, again, I won't get into the meta-narrative a lot, but Tolkien rewrote a lot of these stories post Lord of the Rings and added a lot more, like, detail to them. But the stories of, like, the Fall of Doriath, which are, like, much later in the Silmarillion, I don't think he ever really got to. So I think the version of the Fall of Doriath that we're working with in the Silmarillion is so early that I don't think Galadriel and Celeborn were even invented yet, because they were invented for Lord of the Rings. I think Nimloth also dies. Rip my queen. I don't remember if that's actually explicitly stated or not, but anyway, Doriath is screwed. Doriath has fallen. No more Doriath, but there is one key survivor, and that is Nimloth and Dior's daughter, Elwing. And Elwing manages to escape with the Nauglamir, with the Silmaril, to this haven by the coast named Sirion. And Syrian is led by the same Teleri that Gil-galad was hanging out with. These Teleri or Sindar, whatever, are led by this elf named Círdan. He's known for being really old and like being one of the only elves with a beard. And Círdan is one of the first 3 elves to get the rings of power of the elves, the 3 rings for the elven kings. Whatever, that guy. So Elwing and the refugees from Doriath are able to settle in Syrian, and Elwing has the Silmaril there. So all that murder and the Sons of Feanor still don't have even one goddamn Silmaril. And Luthien got it in 1 try, so okay. Alright, so now we're going to take a break from mass murder a little bit, or not really. We never really take a break from it. But we're going to move on to a bit of a story with Gondolin here, as you can see, the last real kingdom of forces against Morgoth and Belariand. And so, let's just set the scene. You remember Hurin and Huor? They went to Gondolin. Hurin's son is Turin, and his brother Huor's son, you're never going to guess, is named Tuor. Tuor, I believe, was also living with elves. I don't know. I don't care. Tuor comes across a message from the Valar Ulmo. If you remember, he's the water guy who frequently communicates with the elves. And Ulmo sends Tuor to be a messenger for Turgon. Because, again, if you'll remember, when Ulmo was first giving Turgon the message about creating Gondolin, Ulmo told Turin to leave a set of armor, so in a few hundred years, Ulmo can send a messenger to Turgon in that armor, and Turgon would know that he was safe. So Tuor is that messenger. So Tuor puts on that armor and is led to Gondolin, and Turgon lets Tuor in because he can see that he is a messenger from Ulmo because of the armor. And the message that Tuor has for Turgon is a reminder of Ulmo's warning to not get too attached to Gondolin, and basically says that this is the time that you need to just abandon Gondolin and retreat to Syrian. But Turgon is very prideful, and he's very assured of Gondolin's security, so he's like, nah, we're fine. And Tuor's like, okay, I guess I tried, but I'll stay. It's not so bad, especially your daughter, because Tuor, the man, and Turgon's daughter, Idril, fall in love, and this is another union between a man and an elf. And Tuor and Idril have a son, a half-elf named Eärendil. If you'll remember, Eärthel's son, Maiglin, who is also living in Gondolin now, is like stewing in his incel feelings because he can't date Idril, his cousin. So now he's like super mad because now Idril has this husband who's a man, so like not even as good as the elves, and she just had a son with him, and he's just super pissed. So Maiglin is somehow captured by Morgoth, and Morgoth can like see his deepest thoughts and promises that if Maiglin reveals the location of Gondolin, then Morgoth will allow him to kill Tuor and Eärendil and let Maiglin have Idril. And Maiglin's like, sure, man, sounds great. So Maiglin reveals the location of Gondolin, and Morgoth is like, finally! And immediately launches an attack on Gondolin. And this is a super big attack. There's tons of Balrogs. We have 2 Balrog deaths. Well, 2 deaths of Balrogs and deaths from Balrogs. Okay. Like, a few of you might know the name Glorfindel. Glorfindel is kind of known for being one of the elf warriors of Gondolin who, like, dies fighting a Balrog and kills the Balrog and then is, like, later brought back to life. Well, there's also another elf named Ecthelion who also kills a Balrog and dies in the process, but he doesn't get back to life. I don't know why the Valar just, like, fucking hate him, but, Glorfindel is, like, God's favorite, so whatever. Maiglin takes his chance to go after Idril and Tuor and Eärendil. I think specifically Maiglin tries to, like, grab Eärendil and just, like, throw him off the side because he loves killing children. And Tuor is like, fuck you, I think, and attacks Maiglin and throws Maiglin off the side. So Maiglin is thrown off the side of the walls of Gondolin and dies, just like his father. Idril, who's known for farsightedness and wisdom, has felt for some time that Gondolin was going to fall and they were going to need to escape. So she has been, like, setting up secret passageways to get out, so she, with her husband and son, are able to escape Gondolin, but unfortunately, her father and the king of Gondolin, Turgon, is not so lucky, and he dies defending Gondolin and allowing for them to escape. So Gondolin, as well, is no more, but Idril, Tuor, and Earendil are able to escape with the rest of the refugees from Gondolin, and are able to make it to Sirion, where the other refugees from Doriath are staying, and they all kind of just like group up together. There is really no more actual like forces against Morgoth at this point. This is just like a haven for people, for the survivors, and they're just trying to survive at this point. But they aren't doing too bad for themselves. There is still love in the air, as Eärendil and Elwing, who I guess have now grown up, are living in Sirion. They meet each other, probably trauma bond, and they fall in love, get married, and have 2 twin sons. These sons, also having very similar names as per the usual, are named Elros and a familiar face, Elrond! Yay! Elrond's finally born! Good for you, buddy. Eärendil kind of knows that, like, they're just sitting ducks at this point. Like, Morgoth can kill them any second, and he's like, okay, like, it's time to let go of our pride and just, like, go ask for help. So Eärendil tries to sail away from Sirion and try to go west and west and west and west, all the way west to Valinor to ask the Valar for help, which is a very tough task, because back when the Noldor first betrayed the Valar and left Valinor, the Valar kind of like hid Valinor, so it was basically impossible to reach by sea or by foot unless the Valar wanted you to get there. So Eärendil goes off to find Valinor, but he's kind of just like, he's going in circles, like he just can't find it, and he's kind of just stuck there for a while. Back at the Havens, Elwing is still in possession of the Silmaril, and the remaining 3 sons of Feanor still want that Silmaril. So they once again send a message and are like, Elwing, sorry for killing your brothers and your parents. Can you please give us the Silmaril? And she's like, fuck you. And they're like, okay, I guess I have to then. And so, for the 3rd time, the remaining sons of Feanor launch an attack on Sirion and enact the 3rd kinslaying. Even though they're literally going up against just like a bunch of refugees at this point, it's still not very successful. Amras, the other twin, dies. Maithras and Maglor try to kill Elwing and get the Silmaril from her, but she, with the Silmaril around her neck, jump off a cliff, but not to her death, because she somehow turns into a bird and flies away. How does she turn into a bird? I'm not answering questions right now. So Maithras and Maglor are like, damn, our other brother just died, and we still don't have the Silmaril. And also, there's 2 kids here, Elros and Elrond, left behind. Both of their parents are gone now, and they're just like left in the wreckage of Sirion, probably. And Maithras remembers how bad he felt about the other twins, Ellarid and Ellarid, who he left to die in the woods, which, you know, that revelation about killing children is bad would have been great to have before he attacked the refugee group, but whatever. Maithras feels bad, so he and Maglor kind of take Elros and Elrond, who are very young at this point, under their wing and decide to just raise them. Which is crazy. Like, we never hear anything about this again. The next time we see these 4 characters, they're not together, and there's just like no more description of how Elrond grew up with the people that destroyed his home and tried to kill his parents. We just never hear about that again, which is so wild. But there's lots of fan fictions out there if you want to read those. But, you know, I don't know what Tolkien was thinking. So that's just, there's that, another little pin in Elrond's life for you to know about. But yeah, so they're just doing that, and Elwing with the Silmaril as a bird has flown away, and she manages to find Eärendil's ship, lands on his ship, and transforms back into her elf form, I guess. And they're both super sad because she just assumes that Elrond and Elros were killed because the Sons of Feanor are baby killers, and they're very sad. But they continue on their journey, and I guess with the light of Elwing's Silmaril, they are able to be let in and are able to make it to Valinor. And so they make it to Valinor. Eärendil puts the Silmaril on his forehead in a little cute little headband and goes up to the Valar and basically tells them the story of Belariand and of the efforts of the elves and the men and the dwarves, I guess, to combat Morgoth, and basically just like pleads for the Valar's forgiveness and begs the Valar for their help on behalf of both elves and men, because Eärendil, as half elf, half man, has a foot in both worlds basically and can speak for both of the groups. And that mixed lineage, or that like union of the two children of Iluvatar, is the reason that the Valar listen to him and are like, yeah, okay, sure, we'll help. So Eärendil and Elwing stay back on Valinor. They are given that like typical half-elf choice, like, do you want immortal life or do you want immortal life? Eärendil kind of likes the men and kind of wants to die a man, but Elwing still wants to stay an elf, and Eärendil just wants to stay with his wife. So they both stay immortal, and Eärendil stays in Valinor and kind of flies around the sky with the Silmaril on his head because he likes doing that. And that light of the Silmaril in the sky is what is known as the Star of Eärendil, which is the light that Galadriel gives Frodo in Fellowship of the Ring. I don't know exactly how the details of that work, but we're just not going to worry about it. The Valar then, listening to Eärendil's pleas, get together with their own forces and also the forces of a lot of the remaining elves in Valinor, and they go to Middle-earth and launch a serious attack on Morgoth, and the Valar are able to defeat Morgoth, and they aren't gonna forgive him again this time, supposedly. They basically chain up Morgoth and like banish him to like a hole in space reality or something like that. I don't know. But also, because the might of the Valar is just so strong, in this ferocious attack against Morgoth, the Valar just completely crush Beleriand beneath their feet. If you look at the map of Middle-earth from like one of the Lord of the Rings books or something, you will not find Beleriand in the northwestern corner. It is gone now, sunk beneath the waters, gone. I presume that they like evacuated all the like civilians that lived there beforehand, but yeah, no more Beleriand. On the now the most western coast of Middle-earth, now that Beleriand is gone, the Valar and their group are kind of recuperating. They got the two Silmarils that Morgoth still had, and one of the like Maiar that work for the Valar is holding on to them. And Maithras and Maglar coming out of nowhere, again, not with their like newly captured / adopted sons. I don't know where they went. Maithras and Maglar are like, hey, it's us again. Can we please have those Silmarils? And the Maiar who's watching over them is like, no. Any like claim, like family claim you would have had to the Silmarils by your birthright is completely moot because of all like the horrible things that you have done. And so Maglar and Maithras kind of like step aside and they kind of debate with each other. It's kind of interesting. But Maglar's opinion is that if the Valar are saying that their birthright to the Silmarils is moot, then that maybe also means that their oath that they made to like get the Silmarils back by any means is also moot. So maybe they could just like let the Valar take the Silmarils back and with no consequences aside from the consequences that the Valar would impart from them when Maithras and Maglar go back to Valinor. And Maithras is like, no, I don't think that's going to work because we made that oath under Iluvatar. It really doesn't matter what the Valar think. We made that oath to like the highest possible deity, and there is no undoing it. Like the oath is still present. We still need to try and fulfill it. And Maglor's like, okay, then if the oath is still active, then let's just break it. Because at this point, taking on the risk of whatever doom in the afterlife might be imparted upon us for breaking our oath to Iluvatar by not stealing the Silmarils will be better than our continued horrible actions that we will need to do to try and keep these Silmarils. Which I think is an interesting argument, but Mythros doesn't agree and somehow convinces Maglor to try and steal the Silmarils again. So in the night, Mythros and Maglor kill the guards and steal the Silmarils right under the Maiar's nose. I mean, the Maiar kind of just like lets them do it because he's like, they're going to do what they're going to do. So each remaining brother takes a Silmaril in their hand, but either because that's just how they are or because of the sins that they have committed, the Silmarils burn their hands, so much so that Mythros, with the Silmaril in his hand, I guess his left hand, is in so much pain that he, still holding the Silmaril, throws himself into a gaping pit in the earth and falls to his death to like a fiery pit, I guess. Maglor, because the Silmaril is burning his hand so much, casts the Silmaril into the deepest depths of the sea and then is said to just wander around Middle-earth, a shell of himself, singing his sad ballads about all the horrible things that he's done. And so that means that there is only one son of Feanor left, and he's like barely conscious. And it means that very poetically, we have one Silmaril in the sky with Eärendil, we have one Silmaril in the sea where Maglor tossed it, and we have one Silmaril in the depths of the earth with presumably Mythros' burning corpse. So all this drama, and much like their father, it amounts to nothing because the Sons of Feanor just did a lot of horrible stuff, and in the end, they never even got the Silmarils. Or even worse, I guess, they did get the Silmarils and they couldn't keep them because of all the horrible things that they had done to get to that point, and the fact they just really didn't earn it at all. So that's pretty horrible, that's pretty tragic, but like kind of in a fun way, you know, I mean, like I like the story. It's horrible, it's terrible, it's very cruel, but it's kind of fun. And so to sort of wrap things up, the Valar kind of lift their ban on the Noldor who left Valinor. They basically are like, okay, you can come back to Valinor if you want. They also extend that invitation to a lot of the elves who were born in Belariand, who maybe didn't get that choice, to see if they want to go to Valinor, and a bunch of elves do go back, but there are some elves who stay. Namely, we have Galadriel and Celeborn, of course, stay in Middle-earth. Elrond, of course, stays in Middle-earth. Celebrimbor, the guy who eventually will make the Rings of Power, stays in Middle-earth. And Gil-galad, that one elf guy who's kind of related to Galadriel in this version, stays in Middle-earth, and he becomes the next and last High King of the Noldor. You might recognize Gil-galad's name from, I believe, the Fellowship of the Ring. He's mentioned because he is fighting with Elrond in the last alliance against Sauron. And also some of the men who helped the Valar and were helping the elves in Belariand are given a little bit of a little gift for their good behavior. The Valar create a little island for them called Numenor. I think there's like an accent there, whatever. And all the good men in Belariand get to move to Numenor, where they will live much longer lives, and they become known as the Dunedain, which is who Aragorn is descended from. Specifically, Aragorn is descended from Elros, Elrond's twin brother, because Elros decides to take on the fate of men. He decides to become mortal. I mean, I think he still lives for like 600 years or something, but Elros becomes the first king of Numenor, and all the kings of Numenor are descended from him, including, eventually, Aragorn. So yeah, that basically marks the end of the First Age. There's a bunch of elves left in Middle-earth. There's no more Beleriand, but there is Numenor, which has a bunch of men on it, who I'm sure will not do anything bad with all the privilege that they've been given, which kind of leads into the Second Age, which is also a very interesting story. A lot of these characters that are live at the end of this, which are not a lot of them, will also die. Rip Celebrimbor and Gil-galad. Spoilers, I guess, if you don't care, it's okay. But, that story is kind of being told in the current Rings of Power TV show. So, there's ways you can learn about that. I hope this was a helpful explanation of the very dramatic and a little bit convoluted, not really, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. People make bad choices and bad things happen. And that's how it goes. That's the Silmarillion. It's really fun to read. I hope this can kind of lay the groundwork, so if you still want to read the Silmarillion, you at least don't have to stress so much about knowing what's going on and knowing who's important, because I've kind of told you who you need to care about and maybe given you an idea about who these characters are, which will maybe help when you have to read them all for yourself. Because I do really recommend reading the Silmarillion. It's very fun. There's lots of great prose and great dialogue. It's very interesting to read for yourself. If you also want to look into the History of Middle-earth series, that's where a lot of the alternative versions of these stories come from, because I think, like I alluded to in the beginning, the published Silmarillion is just kind of one, probably most accurate, but still just one possible version of the Silmarillion story that Tolkien was thinking of telling. So hope this was helpful. Feel free to share any of your favorite or least favorite Silmarillion characters, any of your Silmarillion hot takes, any versions of these stories that you prefer over others or just find interesting. And yeah, enjoy reading.